Hello and welcome. Thank you for attending our catfish fishing tips edition of Ask an Angler. Today we have special guest here with us, catfish tournament angler and local guide Roger Gillock, and he is going to be going into some more detailed information after we kind of go through our catfishing 101 to get you started. Coming into that great time of year to be fishing, so we're going to go through just how to get you set up. And if you're here for some of the more advanced, want to get into it, Roger's the guy, and we're going to let him go through that for us. So to kick it off, we're just going to go through just some basic hooks and setups. The great thing about catfish is you don't need a whole bunch of tackle. You can go right to your Walmart, any of your local bait and tackle. You just need, some decent hooks, some weight maybe, or a bobber. This is a great time of year. You don't need to be fishing off the bottom. Those fish are pushing up pre-spawn. You got you're going to have the shad spawn going on any day now through the month of May. And that really brings in your predators, your blue cats especially. And channel cats are always going to be up on that riprap. So we're just going to go through some basics of where you're looking to fish right now, no matter if you're fishing in a farm pond or if you're out on the big reservoir, where you need to be looking to find fish, and then what, your easiest bait to get, depending on, what skill level that you're at this point in your angling career. So with that, we have a few hooks here. Most people think of catfishing, we're thinking of circle hooks. That's the primary hook that the majority of catfish anglers use. One, because it helps us do a lot of good catch and release because we can turn the hook. It cuts down on mortality of fish, because what a circle hook, something that looks like this, and this is a small one, we see that it's turned back. So what happens is when this gets into the fish's mouth, what it does is when you're pulling that back to your line, it's turning it and it catches it in the corner of the mouth more often than not, which keeps away from mortality. It keeps you, when you take your pliers in, if you want to release the fish, you're not getting anywhere near the gill plate. So that is why bigger circle hooks lead to fewer mortality. But you have lots of hook options. So this right here is going to be, in your 1 to 3/0 size, the very small circle hooks. And these are fine. You can struggle with bigger fish because the corners of their mouth, you're getting more film. And, if you're throwing this on some really heavy line, 20, 30-pound line, it's just that it's a little tiny hook and it's working against you more often than not. But when you throw this on like 10-pound test or 8-pound test and you're fishing your local pond to maybe catch some channel cats, small blues, smaller hooks are going to work just fine for you. So, an ideal kind of catfish size hook, a good all around one, because they do have large mouths, even your smaller fish, your 1-2-pound fish, the opening of a 1-pound fish is still this big. And you can see that hook. I've got a 6-7/0 hook here, easily fits inside the fish's mouth. So not a problem when we're fishing with any type of bait. You can thread a night crawler onto this. You can put a minnow, a bluegill, shad, whatever your bait of choice is. It's going to work great on your circle hook. But you don't have to use a circle hook. A lot like an octopus hook, something like this, you get a wide gap and you see that our hook point here is parallel with our hook shank. You get really good hook sets with this. Now, a fish can swallow this a lot easier, but if you're quick on the draw, when you're setting that hook, this is actually going to pull it right up into the roof of the mouth, and it gives you a little bit better play of that fish because you usually get them right underneath, the middle where their nose would be at. So you have lots of different options. You can also use treble hook. Treble hooks, again, if you're looking to catch and keep, especially channel cats at this time of year, just a basic treble is probably not going to get straightened out on you. So that's a big thing with catfish. They have very powerful mouth and their jaws. So when they're clamping down, it is a lot of force that is being put on your hook, not just your line. So if you're using really small 4-6-pound test, a 1-pound channel cat's got enough force that it can snap you on that if your drag's not set. But the most important thing with your hooks, no matter the size you're using, you really want to look, especially if it's labeled thick wire hook, because you get something that's kind of more of your basic bait hook that you might be inclined to put, a piece of nightcrawler or red worm on. This, I can bend this hook with just the force of my fingers. So a catfish is going to straighten that out, even a small one. If you don't, you might get lucky and hold on to it for a while. Your hook might end up looking like that when you get it back. But if you get a big one, it's just going to pull that the second it turns and runs away from you. So you want to stay, if you pick any of your hooks, just stay away from thin wire hooks when you're catfishing, and you're going to get better hookup because you have more power burying the hook, and then the fish is going to straighten out. So,
Skylar, if I might, on your treble hooks, one of the things that we look for is a 4X. If you look on the label, it'll say thick wire or 4X, 4 times, and that's the only treble hook I would go to, is one that's thick wire.
Yep.
And 4X on the package is what a lot of them will say.
Yeah. So, and if you're unsure, especially if you're in a big box retailer like a Bass Pro or a Cabela's, where you might have somebody in that fishing section who is familiar with those hooks, every brand packages differently. They label the same exact hooks, different names, different sizes. I mean, your sizes are the same, but the way that they're labeling those sizes, it's not just, most of the time it's not going to say thick wire 4/0 hook. So if they're going to have all their different acronyms and everything else for what that hook is. But if you're unsure, a lot of times you can just do the eye test, because a hook that is this size, this is a thick wire hook. I can't bend this. It's a small hook, and it's about the same size as the little Aberdeen size 6 hook that we have here. But you can just tell in the packaging the difference in diameter of these two, the wire of the shank. So you can usually eyeball it. And once you do it a couple of times, you won't even be looking at the packaging anymore. You're just going to be going and getting your hooks. So right now, like I said, fish are going to be pushing up towards the bank. We get into that pre-spawn period where catfish are incredibly active. They are feeding throughout the course of the day. And it usually lines up with the fact that the shad in that body of water are spawning. And shad like to spawn up in riprap, like most fish that spawn. They like to get up where they get the aeration of the water, current, things like that. It keeps their eggs viable. They get better reproduction. Now, they can spawn on rocky shoals and sandy bays and things like that. And you will find catfish push up into that as well, especially on some of your bigger reservoirs like a Texoma, a Eufaula. You're going to see people who are fishing those sandy coves, especially as we get into the evening and overnight hours, when those predator fish will really push up into shallow, protected water that they might avoid during daylight hours. But when you're out fishing on riprap, even though you might have 1 to 4 feet of water for 10 feet away, it usually drops off into deeper water. That's what big predators like. They want to be able to come up quick and then have the retreat back to the safety of the deeper water. So if you could fish anything right now, if you're looking for anywhere to fish, even if it's a farm pond, you're looking for riprap. So that's going to be your dam, bridges and overpasses, culverts that might go into backwater areas, and most of those areas are public access. So it's great. You can pull, your car over to the side of the road, or if you're in a state park or some public access points, they're also going to have fishing jetties, things like that. So the windblown sides of those are going to push your bait fish in, and that's what they're looking for when they're spawning. They get that rebound current, keeps their eggs aerated, so that's where you're going to be looking for shad to spawn. And if you are targeting blue cats, that's your bait of choice. You can't beat shad, especially shad from that body of water, whether it's cut or live at this time of year, because you can catch blue cats on crankbaits at this time of year. They are very active. But most of your crankbaits, they're going to straighten out those treble hooks, because the stock ones that you buy are typically not thick wire hooks. So a lot of professional anglers and tournament anglers, they're swapping those trebles out when they buy those crankbaits with thicker wire hooks for that exact reason. You can fish off the bottom. Bottom fishing is great, especially if you're in a small body of water, a pond right now. If you want to fish during the middle of the day, throwing it out near ledges and drop offs, maybe the deepest part by the dam. Throw in, especially if you're going to have channel cats in that. You can go just a night crawler or a red worm wrapped around a treble hook, attach that to a leader line. So usually you can just cut your main line off of your rod, just snap you off a piece of 1.5 feet, tie it on. And then all you need to do is take, if you're in a pond, probably an 1/8 ounce, maybe a 1/4 ounce egg weight. It's going to be all you need. Now you can use a casting weight that's going to look something more like this. It's going to be more that dumbbell shape where the eye hole's up here. This is a 1 ounce, so it's heavy duty. It's all lead. Most of the ones you see that are under an ounce are going to have the bronze or gold or copper eye guide that is built into the pore of the lead. So, or you can use bottom bouncing weight, something basic like this, like a Lindy rig type weight, anything that's just going to hold the bottom. If you're on the bigger water, bigger reservoirs, you might want to think you need to cast it a little bit farther. Then using, your bigger casting weights, or a no roll weight, something that's just, you can launch it out there. But for all intents and purposes with catfish, where you get in trouble with fishing off of the bottom is obviously snagging the bottom with your weight. It's typically never your hook. It's usually your weight getting wedged under branches, rocks, crevices, anything like that. So the heavier the weight you're using and the more you crank up to get tight with your rod tip, the more susceptible you are to getting hung up, especially if you're not leaving your line alone and leaving it out there. If you're constantly checking it and reeling it up, more often than not, you're going to be snagging up your equipment. So the lighter weight that you can cast to your desired position, the better. And with catfish, unlike a more touchy bite like a trout or a sunfish, where we really want to have, when we're out on the bottom, we really want to see our rod tip. We want to see it taut like that because we need to be able to identify the slightest tap tap. Doesn't work that way with catfish. They're going to pick it up and go. So it's not as important when you cast out to get that really tight. So if you just have enough weight to where you're getting and reel it up to where you don't have the wind can't push a huge bow into your line. If it just looks something, just like this that's out there, you're going to know when it bite because it's just going to start going, and then it's just going to take your rod end with it. So that is one way to keep yourself from getting too snagged up on the bottom. That's biggest issue I see with bank anglers for catfish is I keep getting snagged. My hook's getting stuck. It's not your hook. It's your weight. And so sizing down your weight to be able to cast where you're going and then just kind of leaving it, that allows the fish to pick it up. The heavier the weight, now for catfish, probably not going to be that big of an issue. But when those fish pick up your bait, they also feel the tension from that weight too. So if that is too heavy for what they're thinking and it doesn't match up to what's in their mouth, they can let it go before you have the opportunity to set that hook. So keeping it light, allowing the fish to be able to swim away with it, especially if your reel, maybe you have a bait clicker on it, open face spinning reel where you have the drag set really loose, where it can start to pull some line, it has it before maybe you crank that drag down just a little bit to set the hook, and then you might loosen it up real quick, especially if it's a big fish, to let it go. So those are the things that are just going to get you on more fish more often and keep you from getting the frustrations of getting hung up and snagged.
Can I talk about one thing here real quick on getting hung up? You might not have ever seen these. This is a flexible weight. You can throw this down in all kind of riprap and everything else. I've got some that have air in the top of them where it makes them stand up, and you can drag these over just about anything and lessen the number of hang-ups that you get. And they come in different sizes, different weights. One of the reasons that I've asked to come on here was just to show you all some things that you don't typically see in most tackle stores that are available to you. If you go to your place and you get hung up all the time, you might want to try these.
And what are the names of those?
These are, let me look at. These are made by, these are structure snakes, and there's a bunch of different brands. I don't want to mention, particular companies or things like that, but I have some people up in Tulsa that I get mine from at Tackle Bandit, and they specialize in catfish gear. And because you're not going to find these at a Walmart or someplace like this, and they really will, as a kid fishing, how many times I broke off, I had to retie, lost gear, and I didn't have that much gear back then. So this is something that you might want to look into. There you go.
So here we're going to put it in the chat bar. Here's a link to find those exact products right there of the bendable structure snake sinkers. And again, these Ask an Anglers are meant to be conversational. So if you have any questions for myself or Roger or just about catfishing in general, use the chat bar. We'll address questions as we go along. And then if we have any time at the end, we'll also do a Q&A. But feel free to ask questions about if we're moving too fast, you want to know more about a specific item that we're talking about, throw it in the chat bar and we'll address it as we go along, so you don't forget it in an hour and a half. Talk more about the drag. So you're going to have drag on your different reels, whether you're using a big, especially for if you're targeting trophy catfish, you're going to want to have an expensive reel. That's it. If you want to go after trophy fish again and again, what you're paying for is the drag. That is the guts, the bearing system within any reel. That is what is changing the price of those. It's not the gear ratio of how quick you're picking up line and things like that. That's very minimal in that price point. It is the ability for that rod or for that reel, when that fish is taking the line, for that reel to withstand that type of power. Because what happens is if you have a drag that I call them skippy, because what it's doing is is not smooth. So you'll see it'll crank and then stop and crank and stop and crank and stop. What ends up happening is after, it could happen on the first fish, it could happen on the 15th fish, it will bust the bearings inside of the reel. And you'll go to reel one time and your reel handle won't turn because it's broken the bearing inside. So when we're looking at drag, really what you want is on any type of reel, whether it is a big like ambassador casting reel that's going to look a little bit different than your true bait casting reel. Your drag is going to be the metal bar on your reel handle for most of those, especially the higher end. It's going to be right there. So what you do with those is you can play around with it, and and Roger can weigh in on what his favorite drag setting is. But typically what I'm going to do when I'm catfishing, regardless of what I'm trying to target, is I want to just be able to go to the end of the rod. And if I can pull the line straight off of it with moderate tension, it doesn't just fly off when I go, that's where I'm going to leave it set at. Now, if I'm using an open face spinning reel, which is going to be a little bit touchier, depending again on what I'm trying to target, am I holding on to my rod, or do I have it in a rod holder? Am I going to be able to get to it really quickly? If I'm using an open face, some of them will have bait clickers on the back side of them. So you can just turn the bait clicker on. That alleviates the drag. So it allows the fish to slowly pull line off. And then when you go to pick up your rod to set the hook, you flip the bait clicker, and then whatever your drag is set at, which should be, if it's just a moderate pull to come off, that's plenty. So when you go to set the hook, you're going to be just fine. Now, if you don't have that feature on an open face spinning reel, you might turn that drag dial down to where when you do pull it, it can come off pretty easily, because with that, it's very easy to adjust the drag when you're going to set the hook. So if the fish is taking it for a while and it's in there, you want to just crank it down just enough so when you go to set the hook, you're getting enough force on the hook. If it's too loose and you go to set the hook, the fish is still continuing to take line and you haven't given it enough of a pull to get that hook point to go in, which is where if you're ever buying hooks and it says super sharp point, extra sharp point, those ones are manufactured to alleviate a little bit of when you go to set the hook, that, it's a needle point. It's going straight in. It doesn't need as much tension. If you buy some of your more basic hooks at, Walmart, an Eagle Claw, something like that, that is, a very cheap package, they work fine. But again, hit or miss on the fish if that hook point is just a little bit fatter or duller, where you really need to have the rod tip and your drag set to be able to set. Size hook. So if you can use any size hook. You can catch catfish on a size 14 little trout hook. If it comes and takes it, it's just probably going to straighten it. The majority of catfish anglers out there who are serious, they follow catfish around year round. Most will agree on a general size around 7/0 as being a good all around hook. And they have lots of different tactics for the different things they do, especially for the pros and the guides who are doing different things at different times. But if you're looking for the opportunity to catch catfish of any size, but you want to be able to get that big fish when it happens, 7/0 is a good starting number. You can go up to 10 or 12, but then we're running into some of the issues that we're dealing with the smaller hooks, where you really needing to specialize your equipment to match your hook, as opposed to having a good just all around hook size that is going to work on, most of the equipment you're using. And speaking of equipment, so if you're just buying a basic like Zebco 33, it's got 10-pound line on it, you're going to be able to hold on to a 15-pound fish with that. And your line's going to be 10 pounds. So that's going to be able to use, somewhere between like a 4 and a 7/0 hook without much problems. That's going to be plenty. When you start getting into 20, 30, 40, 50-pound, especially monofilament, big, thick diameter, you have to upsize your hooks with that just to make all of that work. Because what happens is this heavy equipment on light line is going to tangle up in the water because it just can't support all the weight. So, you get that thicker diameter, and it allows everything to kind of just flatten out when it's in the water. And I'll let Roger jump in on that for cut bait and hooks.
Well, before we go to hooks, I want to go back to drag for just a second, because that's very, very important. You need to be prepared to catch the fish you're going to catch. How many times has a guy said, "Oh, I had one on that had to be 60 pounds. Yeah. Well, you don't know because you didn't get him to the boat because your line broke, right? Most of the time your line breaks because you're either using old line, you're using line that's too small, or your drag is set too tight. I have a 6-pound weight. Please don't tell my wife I stole one of her little dumbbells, but I did. Okay. I have a 6-pound weight, and I take my hook and wrap it around that weight. And I set, and by the way, when Skylar was talking about drag, that's this star right here, this thing that my finger's touching that has all these points. That's how you set your drag on your reel. And you set it to where when you can pull a line out. And I set mine at 6 pounds. When I can wrap my hook around a 6-pound weight and lift it up off the bottom, then I back off of here until it just starts to crawl down.
Sure.
Now, everybody has I'm not saying that's the right or wrong way to do it, but it's the way I do it, and I have my reasons for it. I can still set the hook. As a matter of fact, 99% of the fish that I catch, I do not set the hook on because I strictly use circle hooks.
Yep.
And the weight on the bottom, the resistance of that weight in my rod, when he runs with it, he's going to hook himself.
Yep.
So I tell people on my boat, the rods are in a rod holder, sitting there parallel with the water or at an angle. And when that rod doubles over, that fish is hooked.
Yep.
You don't have to set the hook. You just reel until you just tighten that line down on him. And then you pull the rod out of the rod holder and you fight him. But I set it at 6 pounds. That way I know that catfish on his initial run is not going to break my line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had catfish, once they're hooked, run over 100 feet with that at 6 pounds. Now, it's a big catfish, okay? And I will sometimes have to put my thumb on the spool to slow him down and get him stopped. I don't care how far he runs because I'm going to get him away from any structure underneath there and let him run. Now, if I'm close to structure, I'm not going to let him run that far. The other thing you want to remember about drag, when you get that catfish coming up to the surface, when he sees the boat, a lot of times he takes off and runs again. You've seen that, reeling him in. I will back off the drag a little bit. Sometimes I'll tighten up the drag just to get him coming my way, and particularly if we're in current, if we're fishing in a river. But just before I get to the surface, I look at my reel counter. If I'm 20 feet out from the boat, I'll back off that drag just a little bit, expecting him to make that run. And it's why you lose less fish if you know what to do with your drag and you work it properly and set it up. Now, I've got guys that lock theirs down with a cheater bar, and they still catch fish. But I want to increase my chances of doing it in that way. Talking about hooks, I've got a hook on this. This is a pin, what is it, a squall? Yeah, a pin squall. And this will catch any catfish that swims.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a good reel, especially a mid to high end reel, Penn is a great brand. Their open face spinning reels, their Fierce model is kind of that medium end. You're going to get some good value out of it, but if you're wearing 20 plus pound fish out on it, year after year, you probably need to be taking it apart, oiling it, all of that to keep it going. And that might not be enough. Now, when you get into that next level up from there, you're in your spin fishers. Those are great all around reels. It's going to be something like this. He's got a casting reel on this, but Penns are a great big fish all around reel, whether you're getting a casting reel or a spinning reel. So if you're looking to maybe upgrade your equipment or you're looking for just a reliable brand, Penn products are historically very reliable. You might look for a big open face casting reel, maybe Abu Garcia, their Ambassador series are typically pretty reliable. But if you're buying your combo rod and reel off the shelf, that might be like a Cat Max or an Ugly Stick combo or a Shakespeare combo, understand that the reels that are coming on those are going to be that mid to lower end. And the drag on them you're going to get some of that skipping, especially if you have it just a little too tight. It's not going to allow it to just zzz. And what you don't want to hear on a drag is a lot of noise. It should be one solid sound that's pretty minimal as far as the noise that it's making when it's coming off. And that tells you that you're getting good rotation as the line's coming back off. If you're hearing things where it's like zzz, and then click, 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 zzz, click, 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 that's just, it can't catch up to the run of the fish, especially a big fish that is going to change speed a lot during you don't have the full power of that fish when you start getting 20 plus pound fish. When you're under that, you might be able to fork a fish in and keep control of it from hook up to bank, or the boat. You start getting over 20 pounds, that's just a powerful fish, and it is going to make multiple runs on you. And if you don't have, like Roger here, he's probably, what do we got, 50-pound braid, 60 pound, 65?
Actually, I've got 80 on
pound braid.
this, but this is my big, when you're fishing a tournament and first place is $30,000 to $40,000, I use Power Pro braid because at 80 pounds, and that's, you were guessing 40 to 60.
It's got a low diameter.
Because it has such a low diameter. Diameter is especially important when you're fishing water that has current. In a river, your line will bow out going with the current. Sometimes we fish these with 3-pound cannonballs on them in the Mississippi River in over 100 feet of water.
Sure. And
that line will bow tremendously if it's thicker. So I use 80-pound braid. I use 80-pound not monofilament. It's fluorocarbon leader line. We were talking about hooks just a minute ago. This is a hook. I can set this down without tearing anything up. Thank you, sir. Yeah. This hook, see if I can put my hand up here and show you how big it is. If you look real closely at this hook, this is a Nocturnal Nation brand hook. And up here near the eye, right below the eye, if you look real close where I tie my snell knot, let's look at that.
Up top here.
Okay, I got it.
Yep.
It actually has a piece of like shrink wrap on that hook. So your knot line digs into that shrink wrap and it gives it a little bit of cushion. And that's a big hook. That's as big a hook as I will use. A lot of times I'll use a 7 or 8-aught hook.
And we're talking almost a deep sea setup with this, with 80-pound fluoro on that. And with the snell knot, I mean, unless a fish can straighten you out on that, or you happen to hit your braid on some rocks and it snaps you, you're not losing a fish on that. You're just, that's too much for even, 100-pound blue cat to pull out on you.
Exactly. So that's the whole purpose. I've got 80-pound braid to that little float right there is intended to hold that bait just up out of the silt on the bottom. I can adjust that bait, and I can put larger ones or smaller ones on depending on the size of bait that I'm using. Sometimes in the Mississippi River, we're using a skipjack for bait, and it may be a 2 or 3 pound skipjack.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how a blue cat can swallow one of those.
Oh, yeah.
You catch 20-pound blue cats on a 3-pound bait sometimes.
Yeah.
But then I've got mine going into, this is called a Luxem chain swivel, which gives you much more spin. As this bait is in a river current and it's spinning all the time, this will keep you from getting your line tucked up. I got a little rattle on the end of that. And you might notice all of these are crimped on. They're not tied on. You see the crimp on either end of that Luxem chain swivel? That crimp is a lot stronger than knots that we can tie, and it doesn't.
And it's hard to tie knots at this size of line diameter.
I have got 2 crimps at each location, and both crimps are crimped twice. Mm-hmm. Yes, I wear suspenders and a belt when I fish. This right here goes into, this is one of those weights. This is one that has got, this one's a little unusual because it's got air at the top. It's got shot, split shot, not gunshot actually is what we use in them. And then this is a little filter that you can put liquid scent on and create a scent trail.
Very cool.
It's these again, Tackle Bandit carries all the terminal tackle that I use. But even if I use a hook like that when I'm fishing a tournament, I'm still going to use the right hook size for the bait or for the fish that I'm fishing. If I'm catching 10-pound channel cats, I'm going to downsize my hook. The other thing I want everybody to know is that typically catfish are not afraid of a hook. They're not hook weary. Yeah. When I was a kid, we used to cover them up. We put that worm on there and we had it completely covered. No metal showing, just the whole thing. I just skin hook my bait with this in a number of different places, depending on what I'm trying to do with it. I want to show you one thing since we're talking about bait here real quick. And the rest of the guides are going to hate me for showing you guys this secret.
And to answer the question that's in there, what's the rattle for? So the rattle is just, it's an added attractant. It's making noise. So like your crankbaits, your lipless crankbaits that have the ball and rattle in it, when this is sitting down on the bottom, especially in current, the current's hitting that rattle and it's allowing for some extra, enticement. And with the setup that he's just shown, we have sound, we have scent, and we have our bait. So, and we're picking it up off the bottom, which is what he's showing with that bobber. If you do any research on catfish rigs, it's referred to as a Santee rig. It was made popular in Santee Cooper in South Carolina, one of the big blue cat fisheries of North America. And all it is it's just pulling your bait up. Catfish are more than willing to go down into the bottom to grab it. But you will be shocked of just pulling it up 6-8 inches to where they can really see it, especially if you're using live bait or let's say the tail end of the shad. I don't know about you, Roger, but when I fish, if I can avoid it, I'm always using the back half of the tail if I'm using cut, because you're getting that action when it's in the water, whether you're below a float, whether you're off the bottom. Even when you're fishing still water, there is current in that water. You may not notice it because it's very subtle, but it is going to give action to your bait. So if you have the tail end, predators like to attack from behind and below. So they want to get that tail when they're coming in. If I'm running jug lines, I'm going to use all the bait that I've got. So if it's a big shad, I might cut it into thirds. If it's a 6-inch shad, I might just cut it in half and I'll use the head. And if I'm using the head, instead of going through the eyes, which is what a lot of people do because the fish is already dead, so you don't need to keep it alive. What happens is those eye hole sockets are hollow. So your circle hook, when it pushes those eyes through and it's down there, especially on a jug line or it's moving around a lot, that hook can actually just come right back out from that. So if you go in on the bridge of the nose, there's a little bone on most fish right there, and you can slip that hook up underneath it, and then it's not going to come back. So if you're using the heads for bait, put it on the bridge where you can feel that little piece of cartilage and you can slip the hook under instead of going through the eyes, because that hook point can come back out. And then if you're using cut bait and you're using the back half, go, right in the middle of the bait, give yourself a good center line of it. But if you're using live bait, you probably want to try to keep that fish alive. So like what he was talking about of, using different anchor points along the back of how you want that fish to be oriented as it's live for when the fish is going to come take it. Because sometimes it's more advantageous to have the hook point, knowing that the fish is going to be attacking from the rear, to have the hook point in the front of the fish. So when it inhales it, your hook is there. Because if it gets it and it inhales the whole fish and you're on the back half, now you're having to fight pulling that hook point back out through the fish and getting it to catch the mouth of the fish, as well as Roger's a catch and release guy, is going out there, doing this. We want to sustain our fisheries, and especially when we get bigger fish. When you start getting fish over 30 inches, that is very difficult to get fish to that size. So when we're releasing 30-inch fish, we don't want that hook anywhere near their gills if we can avoid it. So that's why if you're targeting trophies, use the equipment to be able to not only play and land the fish, but so that you can release the fish unless you plan on keeping it.
You're talking about cuts of bait. We use heads sometimes. We use fillets. We use tails. One of my favorite cuts is, when you fillet a fish and you start behind the gills and you take it down to the tail, you can take a big gizzard shad, fillet him from the tail up toward the head on both sides. So you got a spine piece and it's what we call a flapper.
Yeah, and you get your scent trail coming off
and
of that.
You've got a lot. Now, I'll show you something. I don't know if you can see these well enough, but these are, what do they call these? The ladies use them in cutting material, zigzag scissors. There's a name for them. I forget what they are. These are my wife's. I stole them from her because the tip was broken. Don't tell her about this either. You can take the edge of that fillet and cut that edge with these scissors, and it gives it much more surface area on the edge. Plus, it'll flutter more out on the edge of that. And that, how catfish are attracted, big catfish are lazy. Mm-hmm. And if they can lay below where smaller catfish are feeding and stripers are feeding on bait and eat the pieces, they're happy with that. That zigzag pattern on there makes that bait flutter like one that was falling down that got away from the other fish.
Yeah.
And they're very competitive about that. Don't tell my buddies I
There we
told
go.
you about that.
Pinking shears.
Pinking shears. That's what they are. Just another tip on how to use different parts of the bait. Please, guys, do me one favor. We do have some skipjack in Oklahoma.
Yep. Especially below Eufaula.
Yep. In our rivers below Eufaula. Please don't waste that resource. Use it. Okay. It is great catfish bait for those bodies of water that have that bait.
Yeah.
But when you catch them, I see guys do this all the time. Please, please, please don't throw them in a bucket out there in the sun.
Yeah.
By the time you get done fishing for skipjack and get them back to the truck and put them on ice, they're going to be soft and mushy. You're going to have to go through a lot more of it because it's not going to stay on the hook. Please have your ice chest down near where you're fishing and put that bait in that ice chest. Conserve it. You'll use a lot less of it, okay? And it'll be a better bait. When we fish tournaments, we use bait we catch the night before the tournament. Mm-hmm. It's just the fresher the bait is. If you're going to go out there and fish against the best people in the world and you're serious about what you do, you want the freshest bait that you can get, whether it's shad or skipjack or moon eye or gold eye. I don't know if you can use gold eye here in Oklahoma. Are they protected at all? Some states they are.
Yeah, we'd have to ask our law enforcement friends on that. Most of what you're looking for in Oklahoma, if you're getting out there, especially if you're throwing a throw net, it's going to be primarily gizzard shad, and in some lakes it's going to be threadfin and in a combination. But yeah, below on the Canadian, below Eufaula, there is a healthy population of pretty good sized skipjack. I mean, up to 2-3 pound skipjack. I mean, you can catch them on rooster tails, and just if you're down there white bass fishing, you might catch a bunch of skipjack some days when they pile up in there. And another thing, if you're on a boat, use your live well to keep your bait. Because then you're keeping them alive. And even if you think you're going to be using cut bait, you're at least keeping them alive to giving yourself that option. If you throw them in a fraybill bucket or just a bucket and you're just leaving them there, they're going to die within a couple of minutes without having that aerated, oxygenated water. And even more, you might take a bag of ice, throw a bag of ice in your live well before you pump in water, lowers that water temperatures. It takes the stress out of the fish. They've obviously just been brought out sometimes from deeper water. If you're throwing a throw net, you can acclimate them better by putting them into kind of a colder water by just dumping a bag of ice in your live well. And that's going to keep them in a sedated state. They may even look dead, but then when you go to use them and you're putting them back in the water, they hit that warmer water temperature, reinvigorates them, but you have a fresh bait that's going to last you longer than if you're using a stressed out bait that's been sitting in warm water for however long.
I've got a 50-gallon oval shaped live bait tank on the front of my boat and an 80-gallon live well in my boat, and they both have oxygen running to each one of them. I fill my live well with tap water and put in chemicals to remove that so it doesn't clog up my filtration system that way.
Yeah.
And as long as I have enough ice in there and enough chemicals to take the chlorine out, and I've got a real good filtration system in it, it'll keep those bait live and healthy for the day and I never try to catch bait for 2 days. My rule is I go catch bait in the morning on a guide trip. And so I know it's fresh and it's going to be alive and good for the whole trip.
Perfect. Yeah. Keep asking the questions if you got them. Just to reiterate, Roger's got a lot of great stuff to show you. So I'm not going to take up too much of your time so that he can go through everything that he's brought to share with you guys. If there's one thing that you can take away just right now, he's going to show a lot of high-end catfish. I mean, if you are super serious about making this either a profession or you just want to be one of those weekend warriors that all you do is catfish and you want to just get as good at it as you can, there is no better time than right now through the next few weeks for sure. A lot of people talk about fishing the catfish spawn. What you are fishing is the pre-spawn. Like all species, and in particular catfish, when they go to spawn, they are no longer feeding. They are completely shut down from feeding. So they might defend a hole, and that's when people go in and they noodle, because those fish are protecting their nest, and they are willing to give a short strike on your hand, but they're not actively looking to inhale bait to eat it. Crappie do it, male crappie. They're chasing fish away. You can catch them if you have your hook point far enough back. Same thing with bass, but they're not actively looking to feed. They're aggressive because they're defending their nest, their eggs, or their fry. So what you're looking for right now is we're fishing the shad spawn. that's bringing in the majority of our catfish, especially along areas of a dam where you have lots of riprap, lots of areas for a good number of shad. Concrete slabs up against walls are also, especially if the water level has come up just a little bit onto those slabs, that provides a nice place for shad to lay their eggs. And those catfish will actually funnel the shad up onto those slabs and run them down. And, working in basically a disorganized pack of pushing fish around. And that's when you're getting like schooling catfishing. You can get into pretty prolific bites, especially with blue cats. Now, if you happen to be fishing any of our Oklahoma City area lakes, remember, if you're going to get bait, you cannot throw a throw net in city lakes. So if you're out there and you want to get shad, it can be difficult to get shad. Now, you can catch them on rod and reel using just a very small, I use trout hooks. So this is just the long shank Aberdeen hook that I showed you about the thin wire. But this is about as big of a hook point as you're looking for in the gap. And what you can do is you can just take a straight crappie nibble and put a crappie nibble or a little piece of worm and fish that around riprap. Now, you're more than likely going to be getting into lots of different types of sunfish, but you can catch shad on rod and reel. They will take a worm, they will take a crappie nibble. So if you want to go that route someday to try to, catch your own shad to use, but in areas like these city lakes, because people are not able to prolifically use shad as bait, if you can get it, you're ahead of the curve. But channel cats and even blue cats and Hefner, Arcadia, you're going to catch them on night crawlers, and especially just any bait that is floating, because while they are targeting shad up there, they are opportunistic feeders at this time of year. So they are going to take any calories that they can get as they're preparing for the spawn themselves. And that's why we get these. Most people say we're fishing the spawn, but for all species, we're fishing the pre-spawn period where fish are actively gorging calories, because it takes a lot of effort and energy for them to complete their spawning cycle. So like Roger was saying about the bigger blue cats, that's more weight, that's more calories to burn every time they're swimming and chasing things. They become lazy. Let's let the other fish do the work. And if I need to bully some fish out of the way, I can do it, but they would rather just sit there and, open vacuum tank them down. So if the winds are from the south, the shad tend to congregate on the north bank, correct? Yeah. So whatever your wind direction is, so if the wind direction is straight out of the east, you're fishing the banks that are on the west side of the water body. If you have southern winds, you're fishing points that come out on the south sides, what's looking back. So if you get a big, long main lake point or a secondary point that comes out that may have some riprap or some good habitat for catfish to get up there and gorge on spawn or on shad, if you have a southerly wind, you want to be fishing the south bank of a point looking back to the south. That's what it's getting blown into. And so, yeah, you're fishing the north end. So if you're on a dam, that's an end point. So it's only blowing into you. But if you're fishing a point, you don't want to be fishing the north side of the point on a south wind. You want to be fishing the south side of a point as that south wind is blowing up into it. So that's what you're looking for. And you're going to see that anywhere where you're reading or talking about fishing and you're talking about wind. You're always fishing the wind-driven side of a water body, especially where there's a natural barrier like a dam where bait fish just cannot get out of that rebound current when the wind is really whipping. As serious anglers, when you want to be out on the water, you don't care the conditions. We look forward to the nasty days where we have rain and wind and overcast, because all that's doing is creating a safe haven for predator fish to move shallow, because they get water breakup and they get a conveyor belt of food that comes in. Because even if you have a monster fish aren't thinking I'm a monster fish. They are ingrained to not get to the surface if the water's slack because of avian predators. It is ingrained in them. Do not get near the surface if I don't have to when the water is calm. Now, what you'll see in the summertime with like temperate bass species on a calm night is they will just bring the shad up and funnel them to the top. They still don't like coming. They'd rather grab them subsurface, but when they push them right up on the top. So if you get just a little bit of chop, that's when you get really prolific topwater days. But it's also a lot of people, they think of catfish as bottom feeders. Mm-hmm. They don't think of them as like a bass or, a crappie or something that's more of a predator species in the middle or upper portion of the water column. And that's not true. Now, Channel catfish get a bad reputation because they do pretty much eat anything they can fit in their mouth. But blue cats are a predator fish that prefer to eat shad. So they are going to be just like when you're white bass fishing. If you find the shad, you're going to find blue cats. They like to push them up towards the surface too if they can get in on that action. And a lot of times at this time of year, you get crossover fishing crankbaits where you're catching a lot of blue cats when you're trying to catch hybrids or stripers or white bass because they're right there with them trying to get in on that feeding frenzy. So I see you got something up here for wind for us.
I use the Windy app for because I can click on Texoma or Eufaula area and I can look and see what the wind is right now and what it's predicting to be. And for example, down around Texoma, they're saying Friday night, Saturday, the wind is going to drop. I can also see the direction that it's coming out of at that time. And what's important to me,
and show them
yeah,
what you're looking at. I can cut the glare off of it a little bit.
There we go. This is the Windy app. I'll show you where it is on the what the actual app looks like. Whoop. It's the red one. Second from the bottom down there. I can touch the screen or click on it with a mouse on wherever I'm fishing. I'm looking at where the wind's been blowing out of recently, not necessarily where it's blowing at the time.
Sure, because if we don't have multiple days of the same weather pattern, it takes a few days within the cycle to change it back to what was happening before. Especially if you get 2 or 3 heavy days of southern winds, it shifts back to the north. You're thinking, oh, I'm going to go to the southern points, and there hasn't been enough time for that current to calm down to push those fish back the other direction.
And with the current, it's pushing the bioplankton, which the shad feed off of.
Yep.
So the shad are going to go to where food is, where food and safety is where they're going.
Yep.
So I'll look and see where the wind has been blowing out of, and I'll go cast net. Has anybody here thrown a cast net 20 or more times in a day? That's exhausting. Yeah. It is, particularly if it's a bigger one,
yeah.
you know. I only want to throw my cast net one time if I can. So I'm gonna go to the side of the lake that the wind has been blowing out of. There's the best 2 times to catch shad with a cast net if you're in a boat is an hour before daylight and an hour after dusk. Okay. And if you've got lamps or lights on the lake someplace and it is legal and okay to throw a net near them, you'll have a good, high chance of catching your shad there. The other thing about shad is they're going to follow the plankton. Catfish will follow the shad.
Yep.
So if you can see shad in deeper water and looks like they're holding there, it's not going to take time for catfish to figure that out and be somewhere in that neighborhood. So you find the bait, you find the fish.
Yeah.
Right?
And today with electronics, the way that they've, we're now at the point with electronics where, we're seeing everything that's in the water. We're just 5 years from being removed from where we thought side scan was pretty cool and being able to pick up that. Now we have forward facing sonar, live scope. If you can find bait, if you have the ability on your electronics, and you don't need the top end electronics to do this, you can see shad balls. It's going to be just, it almost looks like bubbles in the water, especially at lower columns. Now, if you're in the top 5 feet, a lot of that is just film. And so you're getting bubbles that are mixed in. It's not necessarily bait fish, but it's pretty easy to identify a big ball of bait fish, even on graphs from 15, 20 years ago. You're going to be able to see those. So when that really is what you're looking for, as an angler, when you go out, to cut out a lot of the working time of fishing, because, tournament anglers are on the clock. Us weekend anglers, we're on the clock too. We got things to do. We can't, a lot of us, you got to maximize your effort with the time that you got to be out on the water. Wind direction and where your bait is, getting those 2 right off the bat is going to cut 50% of the workout just right immediately. You're cutting probably hours of trolling around looking for those types of things. So using wind direction. And
I see boats on the lake, anglers throwing cast nets, and they're nowhere near where the shad are because they don't know where to go look. So wind direction, where they are, and you can take a map. You can go into Navonics and look in there and see, and just imagine, okay, the wind's been coming out of the northwest for 3 days. You can look at places on that lake, particularly ledges that come up into shallow water where they'll stack up. That's where I want to go spend my time. Now, I've got 3 sonar units on my 24-foot catfish boat. I've got a 15 and a 12-inch Humminbird Solix, and I've got on the front a Garmin Live Scope, and I've got a little device that I got from a guy that is called Live Sweep that lets me turn my Live Scope remotely with a handheld little clicker, and I can be looking at my screen and I can find the shad. I've learned more. I used to think I knew a little bit about what was going on underneath the water. I didn't know squat till I got that Live Scope. I started seeing what was happening. You can see the direction fish are swimming in there. And I'd noticed that I would come in and I would spot shad. And the moment that they detected my trolling motor, they would swim away. But if I came in and cut my trolling motor and let it glide up, they would actually come back to that previous position almost.
Yeah.
And I can move my transducer to where I can tell, okay, they're off of the front right and they're 15 feet out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say throw the cast net one time.
Yeah.
I can throw the cast net, I can catch my shad. It's incredible. If you've got one of those, watch your cast net go down and watch shad swim up into the cast net. It's amazing what you can see. But it has made me, I used to go out and throw a cast net for hours, at 4 o'clock in the morning to catch shad for my customers. Now I pretty much know where they are and I can get that done, and I can injure less shad and use less shad. If you've ever gotten a full net Christmas tree to a cast net, it's no fun.
Yeah.
You only want to catch, maximum maybe 10 at a time and make several throws like that to where you can get them in the boat. They're not injured. They didn't beat themselves up. They're not red-nosed, and you've got good bait going forward. Okay. The Windy app is something that has helped me tremendously, even in determining where on the lake I want to be fishing.
Yeah.
Because like I say, the catfish are going to follow the shad. The big catfish will be somewhere near them, maybe not below. There's times when I'll see a crappie fisherman up a little tributary, and he's been there all day long. Okay. If he's only there all day long because he's catching crappie.
Yeah.
Okay. Catfish love to eat crappie. If he's not, once he leaves, I may go over there and put some baits down near where he was fishing, because if there's crappie there, catfish are going to be around that area.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just paying attention to what's out there all the time and showing other people. One of the reasons I really do appreciate being allowed to come here on this thing is the biggest kick that I get out of being a guide is helping other people learn and appreciate and understand what Mother Nature has out there right in front of them.
Sure.
And it lets me go fish a lot of different places. The view from my office is pretty good, So if we can, I'd like to transition into showing you guys a few things, but I can't. This is too small for me to read.
We'll get the question. It's good. They're both kind of the same question about flooding and winds and things like that. With all the flooding, does that move catfish into flooded spots? Now, channel cats are going to come up into grass there because they're going to feed on worms and bugs and everything else that they can get a hold of. Blue cats are looking for shad. Now, if shad are pushing up into those shallow flooded areas, you can guarantee that blue cats are going to be following them, because if they can pinch them off, especially like, let's say you're in a main river channel and the river has come out of its banks. Well, that main drop now from what used to be dirt 8 feet down to where the river flow was is now at the crest. So that's your ledge. So if there's water that's 2 feet up above that, that's a great spot for catfish to come up out of deep water into shallow water if there's shad. Now, flatheads and channel cats are going to spend some more time perusing those flooded flats, because flatheads are looking for bluegill and sunfish, green sunfish. That's their favorite meal if they can get it. They're just like bass. They want to eat sunfish when they can get them. And your channel cats are just your river and lake dumpsters. They're just looking for, they're omnivores. They're opportunistic feeders. They're just going to go where they can get easy meals. And in flooding, some of those smaller fish are going to find lots of good new opportunities to eat food up into that. But the old adage of winds from the east, fishing is the least. That is based on barometric pressure that anglers and scientists and biologists have gone back and forth on since we've even been having the discussion from when it first came up. why people usually say fishing at, winds from the west, fishing is the best, is that typically indicates in Oklahoma that a storm front's coming. The fish sense those pressure changes. Fish like water that is stable. Their swim bladders go up and down. They want stable water if they can get it. So if you get stable weather conditions over a period of several days, we get into pretty good patternings of catching fish. No matter what the wind or the weather is doing, if we're keeping that pretty stable temperature. But with west winds, we see falling barometric pressure. Most people associate low pressure with good fishing, when in reality, what those fish are doing is they're feeding before the pressure gets too low to where they are then uncomfortable. And every species is a little bit different on how it affects their swim bladder, where they like to sit when you get high pressure or really low pressure. But 30.0 is just regular normal pressure. So a rising pressure is going to be mercury levels getting, 30.01, 0.02 going up, and then falling pressure 29.99, 97 going down and going down. So typically you will see more of an active bite, especially for anglers who may just be kind of throwing the kitchen sink at them, fishing bait. You just get more active fish when you have those falling pressure, because they know that a storm system's coming through. They don't know what it's bringing. They don't know if it's going to be massive flooding. They don't know if it's a cold front. All they know is they feel the pressure shifting and that they need to gorge, because they may not get the opportunity because they are so uncomfortable that they just want to hunker down until they get back into more stable pressure. So winds from the east typically are bringing a high pressure system in. And if the pressure is already hot, like stable or maybe even a little high, and east winds are bringing it way up, it puts that pressure on their swim bladder and it makes them uncomfortable. It's not, you can catch fish. If you can catch fish every day of the year. It's just those days where it just seems like you can't stop getting bit are typically associated with, those falling pressure systems. And that's where that kind of misnomer comes from. But that's really what we're looking at on barometric pressure.
Where we have found that it's important, water level, rivers can fluctuate water level much faster and much more dramatic than lakes can. It takes a lot of water to raise a foot of lake. Rivers and the dam systems and how much they're letting water out dramatically affect catfish. As that water comes up and floods areas that were not underwater, there's a lot of food in those, and the catfish know to go up there and feed. But when that water level drops, when it drops, before you would ever notice it, those catfish notice it. They will come out of that shallow water onto the nearest drop off and hang on that drop off to see what it's going to do. But they will not be where they were yesterday when that water level was high. Larry Muse, who's a national champion catfisherman and bass fisherman, Larry said that somebody asked him, well, Larry, why do the catfish move out of the shallows when it drops? And he says, well, a catfish doesn't want to be caught laying in the Walmart parking lot, So the minute he says they come out of the shallows like seeds out of a cotton mill. You can watch them on your graph if you're sitting in a tributary and watch it come and watch the catfish come out. They don't want to get caught up there when that water gets too low and they feel trapped.
And they feel the pulse coming down. So basically what we're looking for is crest. So what I'm going to throw over in the chat bar right here. So this is the Illinois River. Anybody's familiar with the Illinois River, flows into Tenkiller, comes right through Tahlequah. It just reached its second largest flood stage in the history of recording it. And so what we're going to show here is, and this is nearby Kirby. This isn't even this is way upstream, but we'll show it anyways because it gives a good indication. So this link right here is NOAA data. So this is showing us what has already happened in the solid line. Everything on the dotted line is what NOAA is projecting. You can look at this as a river is flooding, and they will tell you when they expect crests to be, with the date and time that crest will occur. Those fish can sense this slightest pulse of water continuing to rise. They feel the pulse, The second that it hits crest and water is everywhere, like Roger just said, the second that it turns over from crest, it doesn't matter that the water is still 27 feet. They now know that water has stopped getting faster and flowing higher, and they will start to move back out. So you might have a flooded area like the Illinois River right now around Tahlequah is going to take 3 weeks for that to even think about getting back into a normal river state as far as water clarity, temperature, all of that. So you're still going to have water flooded all over through the Highway 62 basin in through that. But those fish are now popping back into the main channels to the bends. That's what you're looking for in a reservoir as well. Our where to fish pages on our website, every lake that we have listed for the most part. Now we're adding new lakes in that we haven't had, that I need to go in and update the depth line maps. But you can click on the depth line maps, and it'll, in most lakes, you still can see a pretty good defined river channel. And like what Roger was talking about, of fish sucking back out. So let's say the lake level came up, which it takes a lot of water to do. Well, even though it's up and it's still got flooded timber, when it starts to fall again, even though those fish are still in 10 feet of water, they're going to suck back down those points, down those highways to find ledges. So when you look at depth line maps, it can do some of the work for you before you even get on the water, because what you're looking for is those big bends in those river channels. Because even when water is stable and at normal pool, there is current down through that river channel. So those are the ledges coming up, especially on like main lake points that go back into coves. That's where your fish are coming out of before they start to disperse back into that shallow water when they come in. So you can do a lot of your homework without fancy electronics, without spending a bunch of money, simply by looking at wind direction, which you know, Roger showed you the app. We put it in there. That's a good one because it's showing you live real-time data as well as projections and history. That's great. You can do a lot of homework with that. Cuts out a lot of the legwork. Looking at NOAA gauges, because we don't have natural lakes in Oklahoma. Everything is a river that has been dammed. So most of these rivers have stream gauges upstream that you can just type in the name of the river and put CFS, and it'll say near whatever the town where the gauge is at. And you can watch those rising and falling levels, which you then know are going to affect what your lake level is. So you're looking at river data for fishing in the lake of what your water level is going to do and where those fish may be moving. So this is still, you know, pencil and paper, and you can do most of your homework without needing the biggest and best fancy electronics, you know, pay for apps, things like that. You can still get all that information, you know, brick and mortar basically, to be able to go out and catch fish. So we've got one good, I'm going to let Roger answer this question. So Texoma, what's a good average speed to use during a controlled drift? So I assume you're either in a dead drift or you're using a windsock, or if you're in shallow water, maybe you're even using a drag chain or something like that. But I'll let you do that because that's your lake.
At Texoma and any other lake out there, if you're drifting for catfish or moving for catfish. And by the way, most guys, when I grew up catfishing off the bank, we threw the bait out there, we let it sit on the bottom, and we used the scent of the bait to attract catfish to our bait. The way I fish and most of the competitive catfishermen fish is we drag our baits off of the back of the boat. I'll have 6 rods going out the back of the boat, and I'll even use planer boards that look like this, a left and a right planer board on my line to make those 6 rods go out in a wider pattern. You can cover as wide an area. If you want one out 100 feet from the side of the boat, you can put them out like that and stage them in. So I'm covering a big path of water and I'm moving my boat. The sonars that we have on our boats anymore, the United States Navy would like to have these sonars to put on their nuclear submarines because you can do so much with them, you know. They have a speed over ground indicator, SOG. And depending on the time of year and the temperature of the water, catfish are lethargic when it gets cold, and they get lethargic when it gets too hot too. So I'm going to slow my boat speed down in those conditions, and I can speed it up a little bit. I typically will troll at 0.4 to 0.5 miles an hour, and I just watch the speed over ground. Now, I've got a 36-volt trolling motor on the front end of my boat that I can control remotely. I deploy it remotely, control it remotely, and I will watch that speed over ground. And I can set it up to where if I want to go on a certain track, I can point it in that direction and hit north, and it will maintain. If current or wind blows me off of that, it'll come back to that degree, and it lets the boat do the driving and I do the fishing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always cognizant of what's in front of me and coming toward me, but a really good guide and a really good boat that's catfishing is going to have it set up to where that boat is going along, and he may adjust that speed during the time of day, and it depends on how the bites come.
Yeah.
If I make a big U-turn, okay, and I get bit on an inside rod, that inside rod during that U-turn was moving a lot slower than the outside rods were, so I know to slow my speed down. I'm going too fast. I want it slower. The answer to your question is I'm going to troll at the speed that catfish want to feed at.
Yeah.
Okay. But there are times when we got wind here in Oklahoma. Why not use it?
Yeah.
I'll throw drift socks out. I've got a drift sock over here around the table that's 8 foot in diameter. And I'll put 2 of them out if I've got that much wind. I'll use my trolling motor only to adjust my direction.
Yeah.
Okay. And drift. And I make less noise that way, particularly if I'm in shallower water. Okay. So it just depends. 0.4 to 0.5 miles an hour is the sweet spot most of the time.
Yeah, and that's pretty standard with trolling for most warm water species. I mean, whether you're trolling for walleye, bass, anything like that, usually about a half mile an hour is a really good kind of medium speed to keep it at. And if you don't have all of the different equipment, Roger's running planer boards and he's trying to keep his line away from each other. And we're allowed 7 rods in the state of Oklahoma. You really, I mean, especially if you're fishing by yourself, or you usually, you got 2 hands, two rods, because if you start putting out too many rods and you happen to get into fish, you're going to break equipment, you're going to lose equipment, you're going to get frustrated. And odds are you're still only going to land 1 fish because you only got 1 rod and reel with you. So trying to keep, if you're by yourself, especially 2 rods, 1, especially if you're drifting, you don't have all of the equipment to do more of a controlled drift. You're doing more of a let the wind push you. Maybe you throw a drift sock on. It's just going to turn your boat sideways. So the wind is going to pick the biggest target it can get. So if you just kill your engine, especially like out in more of the main lake where you can just see what the wind's doing, it's going to show you really quick how it's going to push your boat. So it's going to tell you which way it either wants to swing the stern or it wants to swing the bow. But once it gets you sideways, now it's getting the most amount of wind. So it's going to kind of keep you on that as it pushes you. You can just do that on a dead drift at 5 to 15 miles an hour. And that's going to move you just fast enough. You start getting into 25, 30 mile an hour winds. If you're using a smaller boat, you probably don't want to be out there anyways in that. But that's where your drift sock is coming in to, help slow you down basically. But typically just a light breeze is going to push you at the right speed. And then you can have your rod holders on the railings of your boat going out away from you, where you can keep one up maybe towards the bow and one back towards the stern. So you don't have to worry about running planer boards or trying to keep them away from each other. You can just run them and they're far enough apart where you don't have to worry about getting tangled. So that's kind of the poor man's version of you can drift and just let the wind do the work for you, put your rods off your side rail and just allow yourself to drift for a minute to see what your boat's going to do. And then you can just move your rod holders if it's favoring, maybe your boat's heavier on one side, so it wants to swing it towards that. Same thing with jug fishing. If you're going out jug fishing at this time of year, I like to float jugs. Like, I don't want them anchored on the bottom. So a 1 ounce weight. If I use a 4 ounce weight, my jug's halfway across the lake. The more weight that you put on that, it's going to send, and same thing on your boat. The heavier objects are, the more the wind can take what you're throwing out there. So if you're going to float jugs at this time of year, which is great because you can run those channels near where fish are pushing up to riprap and fish are coming and going all day, and you can run a line of jugs, go maybe white bass fish or do something else, come back 45 minutes an hour, check your line of jugs. If you anchor them, most of the time people are leaving them out overnight. But if you do drift, remember, the heavier your weight gets on your jug line, the faster your jug is going to move without a fish when the wind catches it. So that's just something to pay attention to.
I know I talk about a lot of things that a lot of guys are never going to use fishing. And I just want to make sure everybody understands this. Whether you're fishing from the bank, whether you're fishing with kids, whatever works for you works for you. I wanted to show you guys some of the things that tournament fishermen use, just because people don't get to see this kind of gear very often. Whatever rod you're using, I have a rod sponsor, and I tell people, whatever your rod you have confidence in is the one you should buy.
Absolutely.
Okay? Don't buy what I use unless you've used it before and you know why you're buying it and what it's for, and that's what you feel is the best for your pocketbook and for your taste and for what you're fishing for. I talked about planer boards a minute ago. These pull your baits out to give you a wider drift. They even make planer boards for crappie fishing, and that's the way they go with this down, and they come along top of the water. The thing that it does for you is you've got more bait in the water over a wider area. If I pull one line out the back of the boat and I miss that fish by 10 feet, he's not likely to sense that in time to come get it if I'm moving forward 0.4 to 0.5 miles an hour. If I can, I'd like to talk about safety for just a second. As a fishing guide, my number one responsibility is getting you back to the dock uninjured and intact. We had a tournament last year where we sank 3 boats. These are big 24-foot catfish boats.
Professional anglers.
Professional, all of them, okay? We fished the Tennessee River. The river was running west to east at the point where we went in, where we launched, and the wind was blowing out of the west, so it was blowing against the current. And it formed waves that came up that were 10, 12 feet high in some places. What happened to those boats is they came over the bow of the boat, filled the boat with water, more water than the bilge pumps could get out, and it sank boats. And now you're in a river with current, okay? Guys, the number one thing, please, 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 wear one of these. This is on my body if I'm anywhere near the boat. Our rules in tournaments is we have to have these PDFs on if the big engine is running. I never take this off. It's just my rule.
Yeah, and
okay?
and as you can see, most people, you're familiar with the old inner tubing, jet ski, big full body life jacket. This is what, if you go to any fishing retailer, they're going to have these. You don't even notice you have them on. It's basically like wearing a bib. They're very, and some of them are auto. When you hit the water,
Yep.
It deploys for you. So these are actually deflated when you have them on. So if you're the type of person where you are pretty comfortable in the water, you might have the one where you physically have a pull handle. So when you hit the water, you pull it. But they do make the auto ones, especially for kids. If they go in the water, when it hits the water, it deploys the life jacket, and then it's immediately filled. It's just a CO2 tank. And you can replace them. So if you ever have to burn it one time, you can buy just a little replacement cartridge and they screw right in. It goes right in there.
Now, if you fall out of the boat and you hit your head on something going out, these auto inflates, you don't have to pull it. It will inflate for you. If you get hit in the head going up the Mississippi River by a 40-pound Asian carp and he knocks you out, and believe me, I've been hit by them. I've had people in the boat hit by these things. They are dangerous. I know guys that wear helmets when they're going in the Mississippi River just because of the Asian carp situation there. By the way, on the bottom of this thing, this little key fob is what I use to change the direction of my transducer on my Garmin unit. So that's the life jacket that I wear. In addition to that, guys, there's nothing worse than a fire on a boat. I've got 3 of these on my boat, and I check them every year to make sure that they're in good condition. Please have those available. Don't have them stashed down in the bottom of your bilge somewhere. Have them where you can get to them. They have mounts mounted on the side where it's access. I've got them in 3 different places on my boat. Air horn, noisemaker, let people know where you are. If you fish rivers, particularly if that river has barge traffic, please, please, please be careful. Those barges have priority. Get out of the channel. When they honk their horn, you need to give way, okay? And get out of the way. If you have an upriver barge that's pushing a 10-foot wake in the front end of it, you don't want to be anywhere near it when he gets to you.
Yeah.
I know I'm talking about safety. Guys, this time of year, we just started getting warm weather. Hydrate. Hydrate. There are more guys that have heat stroke, accidents like that. They get out and get themselves in trouble. Always have 15 or 20 of these in your ice chest so you can get water into you. When you're catching catfish, you're dealing with fish that have, we call them horns, the side pokey things that get you.
Their pectoral spines and their dorsal spines, yeah.
When you go to get a catfish in the boat, I've got a net over here that's 5 foot in diameter. I use a net big enough to get a catfish in. These grabbers, these came from, I think, Academy, carry these, but put the cord around your wrist. That way, when you go to lift him up, how many guys have seen a catfish spin when you pick him up? If you don't have this and you can't let go of this without dropping him, he'll twist. My arm only twists that much around, and then it's going to hurt something. Yeah. I've seen guys hurt by big catfish. They're just nothing but muscle. Use these at weigh-ins that we go to in catfish tournaments. We are required, if we pick a fish up, to use a gripper because they don't want that thing dropped on stage in front of 1,000 people and injure that fish. We want to release that fish in good condition. Please use these. I use these in conjunction with these gloves. These are Carhartt, believe it or not, Carhartt gloves that I got at Bass Pro Shop. And when I'm handling catfish, and I'm the guy that has to net your fish for you when you're fishing in my boat, I don't want to get hurt myself. And as a matter of fact, if I've got customers out there, I would prefer them to let me net that fish, get it in the boat, and then I'll let them use the grippers and get a picture of it before we get it back in the water. But things like this, don't hurt yourself. Those fish can hurt you, particularly the big ones.
And it doesn't, and I mean, we're talking big fish. A 6-pound blue cat will hurt you if you try to lip it. If you stick your thumb in there and it wants to roll, it will remove the skin from your thumb. So you either got to pick, do you want a broken thumb and let it twist, or do you pull your finger out? So typically any type of catfish under 10 pounds, those pectoral fins, when the fish is that big, you can slide your hand up underneath their belly and however you want to do it. I use my middle finger and my thumb. You can use your index finger and your thumb, slide it right back up to push those pectoral fins straight out. And then you can hold the tail if you need to two-hand it. Sometimes at that point, you can just hold them and they kind of feel that pressure and they stop wiggling on you. But if you give them anything around their mouth, they're just ingrained to roll, which is why barrel swivels, if you're using a leader, like what Roger was showing with his big leader that allows it to spin. Because what happens, especially if you're using lighter pound test, all those catfish are doing is rolling to the boat. And that will spin, that twists your line. So what happens with the barrel swivel, and this is great to use under a bobber if you just want to attach a leader, is it allows the fish to go and it's not twisting your main line. And that's the biggest issue. You get a bunch of twists in your main line and then they slime it. You get all sorts of problems with your line. And sometimes it can result in not being able to land the fish. So barrel swivels or something that allows your line to rotate with the fish as it goes is going to save you, a lot of problems that you can end up having. And, at this time of year, fishing riprap, if you want to just go catch a ton of fish, go to your local city lake, go to the dam right now, put a night crawler on, if you want to keep fish, you can keep, at most bodies of water, you can keep 15 channel cats, or some combination of 15 channels, 15 blues, only one can be over 30 inches. At your local city lakes, that's usually not going to come into play, but you can go catch your 15 limit of fish in a pretty reasonable amount of time at this time of year. And all that requires is whatever your favorite bobber is, whether I like stick bobbers, you can use a peg bobber, you can use good old fashioned round bobber. That 1 to 2 feet below that, anywhere from basically the rocks of the dam out 15, 20 feet, even better if the wind is, if you're a north dam and the wind's blowing into you, you cast it out into the wind and let it just pick up your slack as it drifts back towards you. But you only need to be a foot or two down and you can just throw a night crawler just around a basic treble hook and just let it dangle there. And you're going to hook up on channel cats like that. If you have the ability to blue catfish, trying the same thing on our bigger bodies of water that have a bigger population of blue cats. There are blue cats in some small city lakes. The population isn't as great and the size isn't as dramatic. But if in those cases, if you can throw a throw net and you have that ability, maybe there's a bait store that's nearby, you're never going to beat fresh shad with shad that you buy in a mason jar, but it's better than nothing. So if you're looking to buy bait and you want to choose between shad and worms, if you can afford both, maybe get both and have 2 rods going, set them up. But fishing riprap on dams or in bigger bodies of water, any riprap that leads to deeper water, bridge pylons, underpasses, culverts, dam, state park fishing jetties, anything like that that's getting wind, that's where you need to be fishing right now. And you can probably fish with just a bobber and either a circle hook if you're using shad or some other type of live bait or cut bait, or just a treble hook for your basic worm, and throw that out. And not only you're going to be getting into catfish, this is a great time of year to catch a big largemouth bass on a worm in a bobber or cut shad. It's a great time of year to catch crappie, any drum. So just a basic as it gets. Doesn't matter what your rod and reel setup is. Any type of rod, but understand the smaller your rod, the smaller your line, the less likely chance there is of you landing the fish that you hook. So if you don't have a rod or you're looking to get a rod, 7-foot medium heavy rod spooled with whatever reel and line you feel comfortable with. That's going to be your best multi-purpose. Go out there, no problems. You're going to catch catfish all the way up to 20 pounds with not a lot of problems. You start targeting intentionally fish bigger than that, you really need to start thinking about looking at more specialized equipment, things that are meant to handle that fish, not only for you as the user to be able to play it and land it, but for the safety of the fish. Because, we're conservationists. We love to fish. I can't imagine a world in which I can't go fishing. And especially a world that isn't like a North America where we have public access to our bodies of water. We don't have to, you might have to pay a boat ramp fee or a service fee or things like that, but we're not paying for the water. And in order for us to continue to maintain that, it is you guys continuing to fish that keeps that going. If you don't hunt or fish, our agencies don't exist because the government will see no need to keep this resource and it'll turn over to private real estate. None of us want that. That's not a world we want to live in. So anything that you can do, even if it's just buying your basic fishing rod and some hooks and bobbers, spending $17 at Walmart does more to support us than any type of campaign or anything you can go and do, because we get federal excise taxes from every piece of fishing equipment you use. That money goes directly into restoration. It goes nowhere. That goes into building fishing boat ramps, fishing jetties, stocking fish, habitat management. That's you guys. That's not us. That is your money going to work for you when you buy fishing equipment. When you buy a fishing license, that is what funds our agency. That's what pays our salaries. That's what buys our trucks and things like that. But it is you guys actually going out and participating that is really paying for the resource that you get to enjoy. So always have that on the back of mind when you're thinking, maybe I'm not going to go fishing this year or something got in the way. Just one weekend a year of taking a family member who's never gone before, introducing a kid, anything like that is doing more for conservation in North America than anything else that you can do. And it doesn't matter if you are a professional angler who is supporting a multi-million-dollar tackle industry, or, Jenny from the block who is going to spend $15 to go catch a bunch of fish on a worm and a bobber. It's all fishing, and every bit of it helps to sustain it and hopefully right a lot of the wrongs that we've made along the way with management decisions because we didn't know better. And so trying to enhance these resources to make them better than what we found them, we can't do that if you guys don't hunt and fish. So we appreciate you being on here, allowing us to talk to you about the stuff that you're interested in. And these are meant to be conversational. So anything you can ever think of, what you got a crazy idea, you got my contact information. We'll do an Ask an Angler on a subject matter that you are curious about, because we want to know what you guys want to know. We're just trying to help put you on as many fish at the right times a year so that you can maximize that little bit of time that you can get out and go fish, because it isn't what you do for a living. So the more you can maximize those efforts with information that we can give you to help you be a better angler is not only going to improve the sport, but it's going to help sustain those future generations, because that is institutional knowledge that once it's lost, we don't get it back. So just always have that in the back of mind. I'm going to turn it over to Roger now for full in. We're going after all of the advanced professional trophy tips that Roger can give out here.
Listen to what you have just said. I had my mind was just flooded with all kinds of things that I wanted to add a little bit of information on or do something. You talked about bait, and you can't throw a cast net in our local city lakes. I was at Cabela's the other day, and I noticed in their frozen bait department, they're using Ayers. Ayers is an Oklahoma fish distributor. Okay, they're up in Boyington, Oklahoma. Mark Ayers and Sons. Ayers and Sons is the name of them. But you can go to Cabela's. They've got frozen skipjack. They've got frozen gizzard shad. They've got frozen threadfin. You can go get those baits from an Oklahoma bait company. And if you don't want to go catch them, you don't have access, or you don't want to go throw a cast net or learn how to throw it, anything like that, that's available. The other thing that I have found at the fishing stores, they're called, there. These are called Gulp Alive. And I don't know if you can see these little things. They are not alive, okay? But they're called Gulp Alive. If you don't want to go buy minnows and run an aerated minnow bucket, and you want to fish with the next best thing to it, crappie fishing, panfish fishing, these are absolutely incredible, and they're real tough plastic.
Oh, yeah.
So you can catch dozens of fish with these. I've tried these side by side with minnows, catching crappie, and that would last you, and you can keep it. It's you can put the lid on it,
and you get multiple uses out of it. When you're using a minnow, you usually get one fish per minnow. These, you can soak them again. They sell the sprays that you can spray them. They don't all. Some of them come in a plastic bag that has just a little bit of that liquid. This is a bigger size, but you just dip them after you catch that fish, and you're getting. It's very hard plastic. You can catch several fish on one bait, as opposed to paying the same amount of money, maybe even more, from a bait shop to get live bait that you're only going to get one fish out of, unless you're lucky enough that the bait's a little bit bigger, and maybe when you get it back, it's been a little mutilated. Maybe you cut them and use it for cut bait. But outside of that, you get more value out of something like this.
I found the smallest size is the one that works best for me. And I'll go find the little packages of them. I'll open them up and mix, and they've got them in different colors. So I'll keep them all in these jars. And it's, a lot of times you get an opportunity to go fishing, but not a whole lot of time before that. You know what, the weather's let's go fishing. You grab these things and you go to the lake, and you can put them underneath a bobber. They're absolutely fantastic. They're great for kids because you can put them on there and they stay on there. It's a great thing. I wanted to show you one more safety thing. This is something that this ball, you can see this, has a little connector down on the bottom of it. Your anchor rope goes through this connector, and it'll only go one way. And it says boat one direction and the rest of it going this way. This is used in a river. Most of the boating accidents that happen in a river happen because you put your anchor rope out. It looks like it's out there in front of you, but it's bowed underneath the boat and actually gets wrapped around your lower unit of your big engine. Now, once you fire up that engine, your anchor rope will tighten up, and it'll spin your boat around backwards into the current, and the current will come over the back of that boat, and you will sink incredibly fast.
And you're dead in the water because you've now taken your prop out of play.
Exactly.
You wrapped it up.
This anchor rope lets me hold that anchor rope out in front of the boat, so I know it's not getting behind me. Besides that, the other thing, you won't believe this until you look at a video and see it. I got this from Fish Finders, is their website. If you like pulling a 30-pound anchor out of 40 foot of water, then go for it, brother. But you can actually take off, tie your rope around a cleat, and go away from the anchor ball. And this anchor ball will go back behind the boat. It will slide down. It'll only go one direction. It'll slide down to your anchor and lift your anchor up off the bottom. And then you go back and bring your anchor in the boat, and it saves a ton of lifting that anchor. Plus, it's a safety device that I always use on a river. We don't have a whole lot of river fishing that we do, here in Oklahoma. But in the big catfish tournaments, if you're going to go do catfish tournament fishing, you're going to be in the Mississippi River, in the Missouri River, in the Tennessee River. And you need to learn how that river current impacts you and what you need to do to be safe in it. It's an incredible world. First time I put it in the river was Mississippi River, downtown Memphis, Tennessee. And it was, I felt like I was Huckleberry Finn. I was out in the boat by myself, scared to death, because when you put it in the water, the river's going to take it. So you got to know how to launch a boat in current. But I had so much fun out there. Once you get out of the way of the city, it's like the good old days. It's an incredible atmosphere to be a part of. I wanted to talk about, I showed you guys
And another thing, just a quick on bait. One of the big things about using bait where you catch it, we do have some Asian carp, and I should specify because grass carp and common carp are a part of that. But big head and silver carp, like Roger was talking about, when you run tournaments, especially you get on the Illinois River in Illinois, it's a different river than our Illinois. That one is plumb full. The Tennessee River system is becoming that in some places to devastating effect, especially by Kentucky and Barkley Lake. The Ohio River Valley, the Mississippi River Valley, it is a danger. Those silver carp can grow to, pretty tremendous sizes, and they will come out of the water. And just having, we have enough aquatic nuisance species in this state already. Fortunately, to this point, big head and silvers have not shown a penchant for spawning here. So we have some huge fish. We have some of the biggest big head and silver carp in the world in the waters of Oklahoma where they exist. But they have not shown a penchant for spawning at this point, which is where you see it get out of control. We don't need them to find a body of water that they might take to and begin that process. It is very difficult for most anglers to identify a gizzard shad, a skipjack, a threadfin, and a juvenile big head or silver carp. So when you catch your bait, use it on the body of water that you use it. Don't put it in your live well and because you can go to this river and get bait really easily, and then you go take it halfway across the state. We told you, use wind, use those brick and mortar type educational tools you have, so that when you do get to a body of water you're not familiar with, and your big stressor is, am I going to be able to get bait to go fishing? That's part of fishing, but we really encourage you not to move bait around. It can have devastating effects that you don't want to be the person responsible for that. So anytime you can get bait, buy local, fish local. Oklahoma, you'd mentioned for the bait that they're selling at Cabela's, but Oklahoma is a mecca of freshwater fishing. It doesn't get a lot of national attention, for whatever reason, but some of the products that are most recognizable in fishing are Oklahoma companies. They're right here. So odds are, even if you're going to a big box store, most of the equipment and tackle that you're buying was probably made here in the state. So, and you can always flip those bags around. If you want to buy local, Bobby Garland, Gene LaRue, flip the bag around, see where the manufacturer is from. And you'll be surprised how many of them are from Oklahoma. Zebco, one of the most popular brands in fishing, is right in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So
Burt's Jugs, made down around Moore, Norman area. They're a saucer shaped jug, and the line comes from the top around the side. So when a catfish eats the bait, it flips the jug over, and they're red on one side, yellow on another.
Yeah.
And I run my jugs every hour by drone. So I take my drone up and take it, fly it across the lake if I'm fishing wherever I'm fishing from, and I can check my jugs and get to those fish quicker and not leave them on that jug line, for hours at a time.
And so you don't lose a jug.
And so I don't lose it. If I'm going to go look for jugs, I'm taking the drone up and I'll go find it. And if any of you go check my jugs and you take them out of the water and there's a drone that comes down about eye level, that's me looking at you. Okay. Anyway, couple other things. I mentioned the floats that you can put on your leaders. This is a larger float to float up a larger piece of bait. Some of the sinkers that we use these upwards of a pound sometimes in a river with current. They do the same thing that your other sinkers do. This one in particular is, I don't know if you can see this, it's a cannonball. The reason I want to mention cannonball sinkers, this is what we use in river fishing to bump. The bumping technique is when you have one rod in your hand, you lower it to the bottom. The reason we use a cannonball sinker is I can feel the bottom of the river. I can feel if I landed on a wad of leaves, or if I hit a rock, or if I hit timber.
It's heavy action drop shot.
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that. We will lift these up a foot or so off the bottom and let the current carry it back 3 or 4 foot and drop it and let a little bit of line out. Lift it up, let the current carry it back and drop it. It is the technique, if you're river fishing, that is the most productive for catfish. And if you haven't ever felt this, I'm going to tell you right now, it's the biggest thrill that you'll ever have, is having a rod in your hand, bumping out the back of a boat, and feeling that 40, 50, 60-pound catfish when he tries to take that rod away from you.
Yeah.
Okay. It is absolutely incredible. And it's very, very effective using, and we use some of these. I've got some in my boat shed that are 3 pounds.
Yeah.
We fished, good partner of mine, and I fished. We went 66 miles south of Memphis to get on our fish. And we drove over a whole lot of catfish to get there, I know. But there was a hump in the bottom of the river, and the water was shooting up, and it was hitting bait fish and disorienting them, and then they were falling down. And right on the other side of that hump, there were catfish in there like cordwood laying on the bottom, catching these. And we had to use weights up to 3 pounds to get to where, when we dropped it, we could get where those catfish were. Okay. Now, it's not a whole lot of fun reeling a catfish against the current with a 3-pound weight on the line too, but that's what we needed to do to get to where we could feed them. Again, these floats like this, if you're tired of getting hung up, these come in every shape and size available. Leader line, this is the brand that I use. It's Slime Line. They're one of my sponsors, but I've got 80 and 50-pound leader line on there. Some of my rigs, I will use 50-pound until I get to the very end where the hook is and use 80 on it, just because the abrasion of their mouth.
Which again, with the thicker line, so the fluorocarbon, if you bass fish or you crappie fish and you really like the feel of a 4 to 8 pound fluorocarbon line, it's very susceptible to nicks in it. It has no stretch like a monofilament. Braid also has no stretch, but braid, like monofilament, floats, whereas fluorocarbon sinks. And so if you are catfishing off the bottom, if you tie your braid directly to your hook and you've rigged that way, if you're fishing near rocks or sharp woody structure, you can hook that fish and be like, I have 65, 80-pound braid on. There's no way I'm getting broke. All it takes is it just catching just the top of a rock and you're gone. So being able to put on a leader size, and whether that's matching diameter or if it's, matching poundage, because braided line, the heavier it is, 80-pound braid has the diameter of, 15-pound monofilament, maybe even smaller. Especially the higher end lines. So that's something else. If you're tying directly on, using a swivel is great for catfish. But a lot of times, maybe you're walleye fishing or you're bass fishing, you want to drop shot, tying a double uni to connect those knots. It's more important to get the line diameter closer. So if you're using a 7-pound, 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, looking at what the line diameter is for that particular brand of line you're using and matching it up, not with the poundage of the braided line, but by a similar diameter in the braided line. And that's going to give you a really good cast. And it allows you, if something ever happens where you do get snagged, it's really hard to get braid back. If you have a leader on, you can either pop your knot from your double uni, or you can usually pop the knot on the hook, especially with some of that lighter line. But if you're out there catfishing and you're near the bottom, it's something to pay attention to. If you're not, most of us, you buy a rod and reel off the shelf, especially if it's a combo, it's probably got monofilament on it. And monofilament is a great all-around line for any type of fishing. This specialty comes in with braid and fluorocarbon, no stretch, incredible feel. Like he's talking about, you drop it down on twigs, leaves. You as the angler with the tools that you're using can decipher that by using that type of line, because it is giving us that feedback that we don't get with monofilament. But don't let the mainstream of, if you're reading fishing articles, especially like Field and Stream and stuff, where they're trying to sell you a product, and just understand that each product has its own value in its own right. But don't ever think for 1 second that putting 12-pound, 10-pound monofilament on any type of reel that you like, on a 6.5 foot to 7 foot ugly stick Shakespeare rod from Walmart, you can't go out and catch 100 fish in a day, because that's not true. You can. That's what the industry used to do before it started getting specialized. And the reason it's able to get specialized now is because people like you have shown a penchant for different types of fishing. So we're trying to improve the technology to make it easier and easier and easier to do what we are doing. But there's no reason why you can't go buy, your basic starter kit at a Walmart, a Bass Pro, an Academy, a Mom and Pop bait shop, and get out there and get after them. So
most of the things that I've shown today were made by catfishers who got out and they needed a tool to do a certain thing, and they started doing them. This, for example, I'm going to give you a minute to try to guess what that is used for. Okay, and while you're looking at that and thinking about it, I told you that on my leaders, I crimp my leaders together. You can get crimps at a lot of places, little crimping tool. This is a game changer when you're tournament fishing, to protect your leader line and to make it easy to change out.
Yeah.
I will make 20 or 30 of these at a time. Matter of fact, when we drive to a tournament, the guy who's not driving, he's making leaders. He's sitting over there in the dark with a dome light on in the pickup truck, and he's making leaders. A good friend of mine, Joe Stringer, he's a guide up in Kansas. He went fishing with his girlfriend, and they drove down to Memphis, and she was tying leader lines. And I was so impressed that she was into it. She was really enjoying learning how to do these and do them right. They got to the tournament. Lo and behold, probably close to 200 boats in the tournament with 2 to 3 people in each boat. She caught the big fish of the tournament, 92 pounds. When I say she, I don't mean she was on the boat. I mean, she reeled that fish into the boat herself.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, you go fishing your first time with your boyfriend, and you go out on the Mississippi River, which is a different world anyway, and you catch a 92-pound blue
on a leader line that you
tied and got it to the boat. It's the things that happen are absolutely incredible. I got a call this morning from Brad Doyle, buddy of mine up in Nebraska. Came all the way over to Alabama to fish the CR tournament, the boat that we both drive. And he won the giveaway boat. The giveaway boat was a CR Pro Cat 200 with a 200 horsepower Suzuki engine, Marine Master trailer, probably a $70,000 boat, And he called me this morning. He said, "Guess what I did?" And the tournament was last week or week before last. So I was thrilled with that. By the way, I'm going to do this and probably make this the last thing that I'll talk about, unless you have a question. And I can't read that. I honestly can't.
Gotcha.
We're talking conservation.
So here you had one person. It's Santa Clara or summon to the sort rig.
Do what?
So right here was your guess. Santa Clara or SUMN to the sort rig. Something to the sort of rig, a Santa Clara rig or something of the sort.
Oh, there's
Is
Santee Cooper.
of what he was guessing.
Oh, you guessing what this is?
Yeah.
This is made by a cat fisherman buddy of mine, Aaron Churchwell.
You got a Kohler.
I bought these. This is made when you're tournament fishing and you can cull your fish.
So we got it. So
yeah.
Kobe's fan got it, nailed it on it.
There you go. Kohler. This goes behind his pec fins and it just snugs down on him and it doesn't put a hole in his lip or anything else like some of the other ones do. And that catfish is released in better condition.
Yep.
You know, these things are, most of these things like these are made by cat fishermen they got tired of getting hung up and they figured, okay, what can we do that makes them better? And they're, so they're not great big businesses a lot of times that are doing these.
And they typically then get bought out by the big box retailers to produce them in mass. So most of the things that you now see when you go to a Bass Pro, a Cabela's, and you're just overwhelmed with how much it started off in a garage for the most part. Outside of your crankbaits and some soft plastics that have just been the big brands have been fine tuning over the years. A lot of the specialty equipment, hooks, weights, terminal tackle especially, was designed by anglers because what was on the market didn't suit what they were trying to do. So when you start seeing some of these more specialty items in bulk at a big box, that is somebody who was an angler who came up with something in their garage, their workshop, and because it was such a good product, because it worked so well, big box chains are able to come in and provide them with the resource by purchasing the company essentially to be able to produce them in mass, but still allow the person who created it the control over the product itself, because you don't want to take the control away from the idea man who's coming up with it. So it really, that's again, you guys out there buying products that is fueling the advancements in the product themselves. So
people ask me all the time, how do you catch more fish? Okay. And my answer is go fishing more often.
Yeah.
Very few of us can catch catfish. I don't care how good they are if they don't have a line in the water, right? Yeah. So the great thing about what I get to do for a living is I get to go out I fish Arcadia, I fish Hefner, I fish Oberholzer, I fish Eufaula, Texoma, Murray. I fish, we were talking about Canadian River, or Deep Fork is where we were talking about earlier. It's being on the water is just an incredible, it's a gift. I'm amazed. All of the pelicans that were down on Hefner this winter, seeing those things. I've got flotation pods on the back of my boat because it's got a big engine on it. And I was sitting out there just drifting on a lake with another couple, and we were talking, had some suspended lines down. And that's another way we do, rather than pull them out the back, we put them down and we'll run them anywhere from 2 to 5 feet off of the bottom. And we look at our line counters and we just drift. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times those catfish are in the middle of the water column. You'd be surprised where you catch them sometimes. But we had a duck land and come out of the water on my flotation pod on the back of my boat and sat there. The things that you get to see in nature.
Yeah.
I was told, I may be wrong about this, but I was told they were mink on Lake Hefner in the rocks and the riprap around there. Little black mink that run. I watched a pair of them clowning around like otters, and making noises just before dark one night. And it was, you see a bald eagle on Lake Texoma in the wintertime. Yeah. And it's just incredible. And to be able to be out there and help other people. And by the way, if anybody has any questions, I'll give you my phone number. I'm not out here trying to increase my guide business. If you want to go fishing, we can talk about that. But I'll answer any questions. You guys can call me on my cell phone. Anything that I can help you. I'm a guide that I try to work my way out of business all the time by showing people things.
It brings up a good point of what we do these for is historically there has been a stigma on hunters and anglers that, you don't share your honey hole. You don't provide all of the information, which is where we get fish stories from and everything else. But the reality is that when you become skilled at your craft of what you're doing, it doesn't matter what you tell somebody we can show you all of this until you physically get out there and trial and error it for yourself and fine tune it. You can send people to a honey hole day after day after day and they won't touch a fish.
Right.
So, being able to, especially if you do catch some fish, if maybe you have some friends or some coworkers or something like, man, I'm just looking for a place to go fishing. Do you have any spots? Understand that the odds of that becoming no longer your honey hole are slim to none, even in the biggest of fishing circles, just because it really does take going out there. And every time you go fishing, you're going to get better at a certain aspect of what you're doing. You're going to learn something new about the fish. You're going to learn something new about the water. You're going to learn something new about your equipment. You're going to learn something new about yourself. So that is the great part about being in the outdoors, is that it's going to provide a different type of value to every single person who goes out and does it. And there's not very many things on this earth where we can all go do it and have different experiences and have different values, but it is all stemming from the same thing. So, sharing is caring in the fish in the outdoor world. Don't ever think that, somebody like myself, this is my job of informing you guys. I want you to go out and catch 100 fish when you go out there. It stresses me out when I take people fishing because I want them to catch fish. It's harder, it's easier for me to go out and fish by myself and not have, any expectations. It's much tougher taking somebody because you want them to get that same experience, that same excitement, whatever it brings them, to want to go back and do it again. And it doesn't need to be, I need to go buy $1,000 worth of equipment, $70,000 boat and do it. It could just be, now I know when I go my 2 weekends a year, I have confidence that we're going to have a good time. We're going to catch fish. The normal frustrations of, you were using too big of a hook, you were using, too small of a hook, or maybe the wrong size fishing line. Those are things that we can clarify in these types of conversations, that's really all it is. A lot of people, they go out there, they're not doing anything wrong and they're not catching fish. And it's because their lure needs to be this size and not that. So that's all it is. You're using the right bait. It's just a little bit too big, but you don't learn that unless you get all those days on the water. So if you don't get those days on the water, it's only a weekend here, a weekend there, a day here. As much information as you can get before that to cut out a lot of those, what we have all gone through being on the water as much as we have and learned ourselves. I mean, we can tell you what not to do because we've done it. Like that's how we end up with these conversations, is we were the ones who made the mistakes. So helping you get through that, because you may only get that one day on the water. And if it's catfishing that you're into now through the end of June, 100%. And depending on where you are in the state, that could be extended even farther into, before they really get into their spawn routine. So wherever you're at in the state right now, if you can find a dam and you have access to a hook, a bobber, and a couple worms, you can go catch fish right now today. And that's all you need to do it. So
about 90% of the things that I have learned, I don't think I've ever had an original thought go through my mind. But particularly the catfish tournament guys, we share information with each other. Now, I may not tell you what depth of water I'm fishing in on tournament morning.
yeah, sure.
But we will, after the tournament. And by the way, I invite anybody that wants to do tournament fishing. There's local tournaments here in Oklahoma. There's a Cat Masters tournament series that I fish a lot. There's Cabela's King Cat tournament. Go attend the weigh-ins. You don't even have to buy a thing. There's no admission or entry fee. Go to a catfish tournament and talk to the guys that you see with these great big catfish up there. And they will be more than happy to answer any question you got. What size line do you use? What size hooks? What do you do here? What do you do there? If you ever want to go to one of the biggest catfish tournaments here in Oklahoma is the Texoma tournament. It's normally in December, something like that. And they'll either have it at the lake. One year they had it at the Choctaw Casino. Mm-hmm. Just go to the weigh-ins and talk to these guys. Are good, down to earth. They're not highfalutin people at all. They're my kind of people, and they'll help and tell you. I've had more of them. I'd go drifting by somebody and he'd holler over and go, "Hey, slow it down just a little bit. I was drifting too fast." Like somebody asking there what the speed was. People will help you. Now, I got a lot of guys that I've had successful pre-fishing days before a tournament, and they'd ask me, well, are you on them? Yeah, I'm on them. You want to know where? Nope, I want to find them myself, you know? But it's time on the water and just talk to people and ask them questions. Most of us are more than happy to help anybody fish, and particularly the kids. I dearly love taking kids out on the boat with me. I've got 3 granddaughters, and one of my goals is to have each of them catch a catfish bigger than they are. So
yeah, and that's it. And once kids get into it, that first couple of times, you'll see the and kids are so much better at learning than we are as adults. So once you get over that initial hump of the tangles and the twists, and once they really learn how to cast and especially tie a fishing knot, once they can do that, it is amazing the trajectory that they can go so much faster than we do as adults on trial and error. So
absolutely. I don't know if you can pull up, or if you want to talk about that before, but if you can pull up Navonics and look at chart view, I'll show you something that will help a lot of these guys out if they get, particularly on a larger body of water. Right, top chart view. You're faster on the computer than I am. Go to Arcadia Lake. Just zoom in on Arcadia. I don't know if any of you guys know this.
They're not going to be able to see this.
Oh,
I can throw the link up from this.
Can you zoom in just a little bit? You see that road bed right there?
Yeah, this one's
that goes
touchy.
Out on the lake.
Yeah,
that road bed. I mean, tell me they're not going to have catfish hanging all over that road bed out there in open water like that.
Yeah, so I'll throw this link in here, and you'll probably, if you pull it up on your own, you're going to have to do the zoom in. But I'm going to put another link on there, which is the links that are on our website. When you go to our Where to Fish pages, you're going to find a different company that also has depth line maps, but they are lake specific. So it'll take you right to the lake as opposed to having to scroll in. So I'll throw that on there for Arcadia, and then we'll just, we can just talk about it. If anybody wants to go ahead and take a look, if they can pull it up, I don't know if you can do it if you're on a phone, multitask, but here's the one that you're going to find, this link that just got put up. This is Lake Arcadia. And you're going to find these depth line maps on all of our Where to Fish pages. So if you want to just give a quick glance at where's the river channel versus where the public access is, Arcadia is a good one. It's got great public access all the way around. And what Roger was talking about is kind of out in the main lake, the main bowl off of the western bank. You can see on the depth line map where an old bridge pylon, where there was a creek crossing and where you had a road bed that came through it, as well as a little bit of the deep fork farther back. You can kind of, and what you're looking for when you look at these depth line maps, if you're not familiar with them, where lines are closer together are areas of dramatic depth change, quick depth change, whether that be the river channel coming up onto a ledge, a point coming out. The farther the lines are away from each other, so every next line is another foot. So if you have 30 lines right next to each other in maybe a 20-yard section, you found the ledge. You found, either a bluff wall, original creek channel, things like that. And when you can use these, just a basic map that's got really not a lot of information outside of just kind of a depth line where you're at, when you compare that to maybe a Google map of the state park you're going to, the public fishing access you're going to, you're going to learn a lot of information of, oh, maybe I should be fishing on this side of the point and not, because this one goes onto a tapered flat where this one kind of falls off. And that's what all predatory fish are looking for. They use points off of river ledges. That is their travel highway, because when we flood a reservoir, there's still a main river channel that's out there, but we have now opened up the world for those fish. And bait fish aren't always going to be in the river channel. When we go fish in rivers, most anglers, I know myself, I much rather fish in a river for any species, because I know I've got active feeding fish. You know where to look. They can't hide from you, so to speak. So when you do get out to a reservoir, like we talked about earlier in the presentation, wind direction, where's the bait going to be? And then looking for identifying features like lines that are close together on a public access that might be a big point, or it might actually be the river channel bending up against that. Those are the areas that if you just want to blindly go fish are going to yield results quicker than maybe trying and going and hitting a shallow sandy cove in the middle of the day. It's not to say you won't catch fish, but just starting off on a better foot to get you into fish. Those are three simple things that you can do anywhere in the state of Oklahoma, anywhere in the country that you want to go fishing. You can look at those three things and already be 75% ahead of the game before you've even put a line in the water. So
we break down rivers in 10-mile sections when we tournament fish to determine where we're going to go on tournament day, because you've got from 6 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get your fishing done. And we go in and we analyze these with great detail. You can go to Google Maps, okay? Google Earth. And I don't know if you know this or not, but when you go into Google Earth, it's showing you a view at a certain time frame. It'll show you. You look at the top, there's a little icon. You can click on the icon and you can go back in time, and you can see when there was a drought and when there was more shoreline showing that is now underwater. And if you're a bank fisherman, this can be really, really important.
Yep.
I know on Lake Hefner, northwest corner of the lake, it's got all of the riprap along there. There's a place that had it's got a peninsula that comes out that's always, I've never seen it above water, but I saw it at one time it was above water on the map. And if you're going to go out there and bank fish, it's a great place to go to that you can reach in a cast. So you can see a lot of what is, and this is really important for a bank fisherman, use that Google map and go back in time where you can tell it's a drought because there's more brown around the shoreline, and it shows you what's right out there 10, 12, 15 feet in front of you.
Winter drawdown. You don't even have to go fishing. If you got a lake that you love to hit, get out there in January when the water levels are at their lowest and go to where you typically fish. Look at what it looks like, because you can learn a lot from those winter drawdowns of, man, I had no idea there was like just kind of this one cement clump where when the water fell, especially on a dam, on riprap, it all looks the same. When in reality, there might be a big slab that got thrown in there that just happens, or maybe there's a tree that got washed in. You don't see those things at this time of year when we're back to full pool or even flood stage. But during winter drawdowns, just go drive by your favorite fishing spot and take a look, because you can learn a lot from that. Just to be like, I had no idea that was right there. And that can be the difference, where it might take you 2 or 3 times fishing and you're like, there's just a spot right here where I always catch fish. You're not quite sure why. And that's what you're looking for, anomalies with inconsistency. That's what they look for in a river. That's what they look for in a lake. Riprap is all the same until there's one little feature of that riprap that's different, that generally congregates more fish. It's just they just, for whatever reason, like to relate to things that are just slightly different than the surrounding area. And it's generally because it creates something like a current break or very subtle differences where bait fish might be able to hide, so it brings in predator fish. That's what you're always looking for, especially when you're catfishing. You go out in the open water, people talk a lot about drifting flats. Like, I need to drift a flat. Well, half the lake's a flat. Where do you start fishing? You start thinking about wind direction. You start thinking about where there could be natural barriers where bait fish get pushed into because of the biomass that they're following. That's a good place to start. And then all of these different specialty items that catfish anglers are using are just fine tuning kind of those common principles that I think we all share the same opinion that is pretty, you get down into the weeds of fishing with anglers and argue over, 1 point on a treble hook to the death. But when it comes to certain principles in fishing, we're in agreement of, if you want to go out there and just get going, though, it's 3 things, and it really, you don't need much more. And then how you want to fine tune from there. I put Roger's information in there. You can call him. It's got a link to his guide page. Take advantage of people who are willing to answer the questions for you, because more often than not, it's really, we're not reinventing the wheel, and we're really not sharing any original thoughts here. It's just us as anglers find our own little things within pretty common held practices that we fine tune. Some of us for just the way we like to fish, not necessarily what catches them best. Once you get into the weeds of fishing, you start to realize, man, I like fly fishing for carp, or I like, going big rod for 70-pound blue cats. We all came from the same place, and we spread that Christmas tree out. And each one of you could be that next line down when you get into it of, spreading the branch of information that is just a benefit to everybody, because you'll find the groups that are like yourself, that it's like, I just want to talk to these guys. All I want to do is a 9-foot rod for crappie. That's all. That's what's got me. And so we can point you down those avenues if that's what you're interested in. We can give you those contacts and those message boards and forums and places to go. Coming from just a general catfishing tips for Ask an Angler. So don't think that this conversation has to end just because the chat ends and the live stream ends. You have my contact information. Reach out if you want to get into the weeds. You want to get pointed in a direction that I may not have the answers to, but it's my job to find the people who will have those answers for you if I can't point you in the right direction. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. There is no such thing as a stupid fishing question. But there's just a million questions that you can ask, that we ask ourselves, that we ask our friends, that we ask other people. So don't think that you're asking something that, you'll get an eye roll, because it's not, because we've all been there. And until you know what you don't know, then there is no bad answer, or bad question and answer to your question. So reach out when you have the opportunity. Do you have any other specialty items you'd like to show?
I brought a whole bunch of stuff, but it's just stuff. The basic thing is that if you catfish, your basic bobber rig, your basic weight out there on the bottom works just fine. I especially wanted to make sure people were aware of these kinds of floats that don't get hang up. It's got a normal curve to it, and there's air. So this will sit on the bottom just like this.
Yep.
And as you drag it, if I threw it across the room, across those chairs, I could bring it in and never get it hung up. It'll go through trees, the whole thing. There is one other, if I can find it right here. This is a weight. It's a weight that I made these. I've got a lot of friends that use them. This is a piece of rope from Lowe's or Home Depot. And on the ends, I've just taken a pair of pliers and crimped them that are heated, and it seals the ends off. And then I drill a hole through one end to put my sinker slide through. And I filled it with birdshot. Okay. You can make these cheap. They will go over anything that's out there. It just slithers right over it. And they're handmade. And when you buy this is a black rope with you take the inside. When you cut it to section, the inside is a gauze, and you just pull it out and then heat one end of it, fill it full of buckshot, close the other end, drill a hole through it, and you can sit down in a night and make, sacks of them.
Yeah.
And they won't get hung up in trees, is what we fished Possum Kingdom, I guess it was. When you go across the Oklahoma border into Texas and all the mesquite trees they've got down there,
Mm-hmm.
well, the lake with Possum Kingdom, when it was flooded, it flooded a bunch of mesquite trees. And
Yeah.
if you've ever tried to fish near the bottom in mesquite trees, it's incredible how many times. And a buddy of mine showed me these that he made, and I made them, and I've used them on my boat whenever I'm in that situation where I'm fishing flooded timber. They work real good.
Yeah.
But just get out on the lake, fish, ask people questions, go to the tournaments, go to the weigh-ins at the tournaments. I mean, there's one in Memphis, Tennessee, downtown Memphis at the Bass Pro Shop. That's where we weigh in for the Mississippi River Monsters tournament. There'll be 200-300 boats in that tournament. Just go down and talk. Anybody that's wearing a shirt that they got their name on, just go up and ask them, how'd you do? What'd you catch them on? How many did you catch? Yeah. They'll love to help you in any way possible.
And most of you out there, have some ingenuity of some kind, and this is fixing a problem. You're creating your own solution. You didn't need to go. So think about that when you go fishing. A lot of the answers are household objects. I mean, so many fishing hacks are just there wasn't a product that existed for us. And so we have to figure out a way, and then we fine tune those things as we go along. Most of them never see the light of day. Nobody knows. And that could be the guy who goes out in the local jackpot tournament. It's like, we just can't beat this guy. Like, I don't know what it is. And he's not doing it. He's just thinking it through. She's just thinking it through. Like, what can I do? Because all I'm trying to do is pull weight along the bottom. That doesn't need to be a piece of lead. And you start thinking about how things get hung up. The more you fish, you start to solve a lot of your own fishing problems by fishing, because it's just simple, common sense things that you might. That's just not how fishing is relayed to you. It kind of seems, especially when you get new into the sport, that there is this box cutter version of fishing that I need to do X, Y, and Z to have success. And it's as far from that as possible. Fishing products are only trying to emulate what is already in the water, which is understanding the species you're targeting. What's their primary food source? Find their primary food source, mimic their primary food source, either by using the food source itself or something that is very like it. You're going to find success. And that is the key to fishing. And April, maybe May in Oklahoma now, it seems like we go right from winter to summer now. So this was an up and down April for lots of warm water anglers, but May, as we get to right now, this is, I mean, getting out there for crappie, white bass, catfish, largemouth, whatever it is, drum, carp. Fish are fun to catch. I mean, I don't know an angler who doesn't like hooking into a fish, like turn their nose up because they caught the species they weren't targeting. It's fun to hook and reel and fish. So this is just that time of year. Maximize your efforts, utilize very basic principles. And as you go along, then you start, getting into the weeds of how do you fine tune your own angling. Maybe you reach out to other people to see what they're doing. And that's where all of this stuff comes from. And so always reach out. Don't ever think, most of the people who are in the outdoor industry are you. They're not, this isn't, we didn't go to school for this. There wasn't some pipeline that shoots out hunters and anglers. We're you. And we're fortunate enough that we get to do a lot of this stuff for a living. And that's even more important, to us, to make sure that you are getting accurate information, that you aren't being misled, that we aren't hiding honey holes, because then you don't share in that experience, especially if you're not able to be out there 30, 40, 50 days a year on the water to figure a lot of that stuff out for yourself, which I promise you will. Whatever your kind of roadblock to getting to the point where you feel self-sufficient, where you are solving your angling problems on the fly as you go, once you get to that point, we've done our job, because now you are now us, and you're learning those things and you're sharing it with other people. And everybody's learning curve is going to be different. And the more time you can spend on the water, the more you can get out of it. But it starts somewhere. And May in Oklahoma is a great time. And catfish is a great species to wet your whistle on, because the same things that you can take to your local pond to catch sunfish that are this big, maybe this big, you can take to a lake and catch this, doing this, nothing different. Same equipment even. As you're using in your pond. So, you got anything else? Anybody got any questions? We're a little over time.
I can't read.
We've gotten through everything that's in there.
Okay.
I think we've given all of the links to everything. But again, if you think there's something that maybe we mentioned in the presentation and we didn't put a link in there, email me, text me, call me. We'll get you pointed in the right direction. But yeah, I'll give it a couple of minutes for anybody. Now's the chance. Ask your question. We got a professional catfish guide here. So if you got a specific question, he's big on Texoma. He's told you where he fishes around here. If you got a question about one of those lakes, rigging technique, now's the time to answer it. If you've got any, this is usually the part of the show where I just ramble to wait for questions. So if you got anything to add, go for it.
No, I'll tell you, I started catfishing watching Steve Douglas, the catfish dude, on his YouTube channel. And I've seen all these other guys, the lenders and all those other guys that do fishing videos, and I would try to go do what they do, and I wasn't having the result they were. Of course, they condense it down on TV, or they catch it. They catch.
Oh yeah, you're just seeing them catching
It's a
it.
half an hour, and they've been out there 2 weeks, you know. But Steve Douglas, just a plain talking, simple Kentucky guy. He owns Monster Rod Holders, makes all the rod holders a lot of us use. But I saw him catching catfish with a no-roll sinker, one of these little rascals here. And I went and got a couple of them, took my bass rods out, and I went out to Hefner, and I threw them out and drifted. Mm-hmm. And I caught like 4 catfish out there that were over 10 pounds. And I'm going, dang, I can actually do this. Yeah. You know, I'd been so unsuccessful so many other times fishing. I was a bass fisherman, and just using the boat and pulling baits and catching those fish that are out there that shocked me, and then feeling the thunder, you know, as we call it. When you're in a 24-foot boat and you get hit by a blue cat and it moves the boat 6 foot sideways, you know, that's power that is just absolutely incredible. But Steve Douglas started me out watching his videos, and then I started asking people about different equipment. I went to the Mississippi River Monsters tournament. First time I did there, I didn't take my boat. I had my 24-foot Pro Cat, but I didn't even take it because I was scared to get in the river. Yeah. You know, I didn't know. I knew I didn't know enough about rivers to be safe. So I went up there and I met a bunch of guys and talked to a bunch of guys, and got involved with a Cat Masters tournament when they had the one in Possum Kingdom. Now I think they've got 7 or 8 a year. Got to know some of the guys. Chris Baldwin is a local guide here. I fished with him and Kylie and Camber, the daughter. The 3 of them are fishing on 3-man teams. Yep. Now it's absolutely incredible to watch that. But just met really good people I could talk to. Like I said, I got a call from Brad Doyle this morning in Nebraska. The guy that he came up, he met me, just to tell you how these guys are. He met me at the hotel we were staying at. He pulled in next to me in the back of the hotel, and he looked over. I had bent the axle on my trailer. I hit a curb, had to cut in tight on a turn. And he goes, "You're going to need a new axle." I said, "Well, I called Marine Master. They're going to have one here tomorrow." He said, "Well, when it gets here, me and my buddy will help you put it on." Now, I don't know if you've ever replaced an axle on a dual axle trailer. I didn't know how to do it, but they sure did. They jumped out of their trucks, came over, put the axle underneath there. In 30 minutes, I was, you know, brand new. But guys have helped me out. Guys like Carl Morris. I'm not sure where Carl's from, but I know he did a video one time, and he was like 136 in the first catfish tournament he entered. Mm-hmm. He said he stunk it up really bad. Well, he won the Cabela's annual one, I think 6 times. And that's quite a feat when you win the Cabela's Big Cat tournament nationally. And I fished with him in Memphis last year. I think he had Big Cat one of the pre-fishing days, or maybe both days. But the guy's a heck of a fisherman. He's the one that told me, go to the weigh-ins and stay at the weigh-ins. Stay till the end and talk to these guys. You know, applaud for them when they're showing the fish that they've caught.
And it brings up a good point for mentioning, you know, how you watched a video, you got into it, and what the industry has done, especially, you know, with COVID and having to go virtual on so many things. There is an unlimited encyclopedia of fishing knowledge out there that is now on YouTube. And I've put 2 links over here. It's our Learn to Fish videos, which are videos of outdoors people from all over North America, sharing their tips for different species. I've also put the direct link to just the catfish videos. From those, there's a good chance that your related content on there, you're going to be able to find something that's reputable these days. That was forever. It was, you had to show up to the tournament. You had to go to an outdoor retailer. There was very limited access to what we considered the experts, people who knew what they were talking about and were going to give us good non-fishing tale type information. You can now do that on your own and vet the videos yourself, because you can see right away from these videos, is someone just, you know, are they showing you, are they on the water? Are they doing it? And you can do that, and you can physically see that what they're saying, how they're doing it. And you're going to find, you know, a YouTube personality or channel that's best for you. And that has really, I mean, in the last 2 years, but in the last 5 years, there's basically a Rolodex now on YouTube of anything you could ever want to know for fishing. And most of it is pretty good. The videos that we post are, we adhere to language and appropriateness and things like that. So whatever your comfort level is on videos, you may find some out there that might have some vulgarity or something that you might not like that still has good information in it. So, but that gives you the ability, we're giving you an avenue to get into those videos of content that is good. And wherever you want to take it from there, what your comfortability level is with the videos you're watching, as well as the content you're receiving, then that's up to you. But everybody should have access to that information. And it now exists to where, we can say as like, yeah, I watch them and I'm like, they're either saying cool new stuff or it's not things that are just so outlandish that it's bad information. It's going to put you going in the wrong direction from listening to it. So, we put up a few videos on each one of those pages for each species, each method to take to kind of get your feet wet. But from there, just go to those people's YouTube channels and you're going to find a lot of great related content that keeps you in that as far as information. So with that, we haven't had any questions come up. We're 20 minutes past, so good show today. We've kept it going. I don't want to put anybody on a 3-4 hour one this go around, but Roger's information's on there. He's been nice enough to join us and share his tips and give you his contact information. So if take advantage of that, take advantage of people who are willing to say, call me. I want to help. Because we're getting there, but that is not what the outdoor industry was really built on when it came to getting information. It was a pay to play. It was you had to go to the big box. That's not the case anymore. Hunting and fishing is you. You guys are the face of what it is that we do. So let us know if there's anything else that we can do to help. You have both of our contact information now. So if you got that specialty catfish question, give Roger a call. You need anything else, holler at me and we'll get you pointed in the next right direction. We got another Ask an Angler coming up this Friday for sunfish. We're getting into coming up on the sunfish spawn. It's a fun time of year, especially if you got kids or new family members and you want to get what we talked about today was pretty basic for catfishing and getting on them. You can take that same thing and we can dial that down to the 10th degree, and that's sunfishing at this time of year, and you have access to them in your local mud puddle. So that'll be a good one. My favorite one of the year will be at the end of the month, which is river, creek, clear water, stream bass fishing, smallmouth bass, but we'll talk about catching non-game species and sunfish. That's a really good one. If you like, when we're talking about catfish don't like it too cold, they also don't like it too hot. Well, when water starts to stagnate into July, that's when Blue River, Barren Fork, Illinois, that becomes the best fishing of the year in colder, oxygenated water, and it is a blast in a cast getting out there wet wading through one of our cobble bottom streams in eastern Oklahoma. My favorite thing to do in the state for sure, and that can lead you down some pretty cool avenues of fishing, getting into that. So with that, we're going to end the feed. This will be live on the playlist for Ask an Angler on this. If you want to share it with anybody or some you couldn't make it today, this will be there, and then it'll also be on our website, wildlifedepartment.com. So until next time, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Roger, for being here.
Thank
we
you.
Appreciate it.